Radio Free Mormon here, broadcasting behind enemy lines, episode 463 tonight, from Jewish to Mormon and beyond. We have a very special guest on the show tonight. His name is Don Cohen. He has had an incredible life journey. It's not over yet, but he has done exactly what the thumbnail to this show suggests, and the title is From Jewish to Mormon and Beyond. We're going to welcome in the studio right now Don Cohen so he can start telling us about his amazing life story and how it is that he ended up joining the Mormon Church and then a number of years later ended up leaving it. Don Cohen, let's bring you on to the show. How are you doing, Mr. Cohen?
I'm doing fine, RFM. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Well, it's so great to have you on the show. I know we had some technical difficulties beforehand, but we got those ironed out, and we are good to go with Mount Rainier in the background.
Very good, very good.
Don, can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into your story? Can you give us a thumbnail version of yourself? And a lot of times that involves, I don't know, what you've done for a living, family relationships, just like a 2-minute overview of who Don Cohen is.
Born Jewish, 1951, typical middle-class Jewish upbringing. What's always been important to me is understanding how things work. If you were to use one phrase to describe me, insatiable curiosity. And that's driven me throughout my life. Started off pre-med, way back when academic performance was always high on my list. In many Jewish households, high grades are a very high priority.
How does that get manifest? Is it from your parents?
Yeah. How much of it is built into me, myself, versus how much driven from my parents is hard to say. Certainly my father was part of it. If I brought home a test where I got a 98, he'd ask, what happened to the extra 2 points?
Man, that was my mom. That was my mom. Nothing was good enough for my mom except A's.
Yeah. And original plan in high school, as far back as I can recall, was to become a doctor. Don't know when that decision was made. I don't recall any conscious decision.
So did you make the decision yourself?
Oh, yeah. My father probably behind the scenes may have influenced it, not overtly, but subliminally perhaps, because I think he regrets not having done that himself.
Well, what did your father do?
He was an accountant. He was actually born in Russia, brought to this country by his parents around 1920, probably fleeing the persecution. He was from the Kiev area, Lower East Side. His father owned a grocery store, and I guess opportunities were limited, but he probably would have been happier as a lawyer or a doctor. So
Lower East Side, are we talking Manhattan?
Correct. I'm sorry. Yeah. Manhattan.
And that's where you were born.
Well, we were in Brooklyn, but the store, I guess, at that point was, that was 1920 when he came over. They ended up, the house I grew up in is in Brooklyn.
Okay. I interrupted your brief synopsis of yourself. I apologize.
Oh, no, you're good. Yes, I went off to college. We'll cover this in more detail, but if you're looking for big picture, met the woman who was to become my wife in my freshman year. We got married towards the end of college. Joining the church was part of that. She was raised Catholic, and so our relationship was not too popular with either sets of parents. So,
right. Remember, this is the brief one.
Okay. We got married, moved to, my bachelor's degree was in religious studies. Started off pre-med. We'll go through the transition. Yes. Ended up going back towards the sciences, ended up at UMass Amherst for grad school.
University of Massachusetts?
Correct. And my wife was pursuing a degree in anthropology. Started our family there. Got pregnant towards the end of that. Worked in Philadelphia as a biologist for a couple of years, and decided not long after I got there that I needed a PhD if I was going to make something of myself in that career. And out of the midst of nowhere, the thought occurred to me, why not just go back and become a doctor? And it was strange to even consider that, but the decision was made almost as soon as I considered it. Headed back to Buffalo for medical school. We started med school with 2 kids, a 2-year-old and a newborn. 3 years there. There's a 3-year program, which I found out about afterwards, which was great for me, rather than the usual 4 years, basically go year round, including summers.
How old are you at this time?
This is started med school at 77, so I would have been 26.
Okay, so you're in med school when I'm joining the church in 78.
Okay.
All right.
And from there, went to Pittsburgh for internship and residency. By then, we had our 4th child then, finished residency, and moved down to North Carolina to start my ophthalmology practice. And that was in 1984, and we've been here ever since.
So you've been an ophthalmologist as your primary career?
Correct.
For how many years?
I practiced for 34 years. As I often tell people, it's taken me a while to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Started as a biologist, then went into medicine, had a side career while I was doing that in photography, retired from my medical practice in 2018 and started another career in high-end home theater electronics. So I'm happiest when I'm learning new things. I get kind of bored if I'm doing the same old thing from time after time. So,
well, the president of the LDS Church, Dallin H. Oaks, seems to frown upon research.
Yeah, the church in general likes to control the conversation. No question about that. And that was an issue for me from the beginning that we'll get into as we dig into the nitty-gritty.
What I want to ask you first, if it's okay, is why religious studies is a BA, and what school was this at, and why was it that this is something you were interested in?
Sunny Buffalo, State University of New York at Buffalo. I was raised Jewish, attended Hebrew school for 5 years. That's kind of like seminary in a sense, after a few hours every day after school. Learned to read, speak, and write Hebrew. At the end of that, you're bar mitzvahed. And all that was very traditional, but the religious/spiritual component of that really did not seem to be a part of it. People can be Jewish culturally in terms of lineage and identity and have very little connection with the religious aspect of the denomination. And so by the time I left for college, I was basically an atheist. I viewed the universe as a giant chemical reaction, and we were just pieces of that. And in freshman year of college, the implications of that started becoming an issue. If there's no point, if there's no meaning to the universe, why do anything? Why get up in the ground? Why become a doctor? Why take tests and do anything? If the universe is going nowhere, if there's no purpose, there seemed no point. And so that kind of created an existential crisis of sorts. And the way the church would phrase that, I was asking the questions: who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What's this all about? So that insatiable curiosity, the drive to understand myself, the world, led me then to abandon my pre-med major, changed my major first to psychology, and it's a fascinating field, but it became evident fairly quickly that did not offer the ultimate answers that I was looking for. Started taking classes in philosophy. And some of this is covered in the slides. I don't know how much overlap you want to get into it, but that's basically, it's that search for truth, for meaning, for purpose that led me there and led me on my religious journey. And it went from Judaism to atheism to Eastern religions to Mormonism, and then so it's been a complex journey.
See, the slide wasn't big enough to put all of that on. You barely got on from Judaism or Jewish to Mormon and beyond.
Yep.
All that other stuff would never have fit, as you can tell.
Yep.
All right. Well, you've mentioned the slides. Very interesting that a person goes to college for pre-med, intending on doing pre-med, and then has an existential crisis, a faith crisis of sorts, if we can put it that way.
Right.
And then changes to philosophy and ends up getting a degree in religious studies for their Bachelor of Arts degree. Here is, I'm going to try this configuration for right now, only because you have used slides in a way that is not so much to be read from, but they're prompts for you. And I think that's a great idea. That's usually what I would try and do in court if I used slides at all, would be as prompts and things like that. Right. All right, so let's go to the first one and see what it is that it says.
Yeah, so what I was getting at there is, for the most part, I'm a private person, and the idea of intervening in somebody else's life, of saying you're wrong about this, and what right do I have to interfere in that person's process? How do I know what implications, negative or otherwise, might occur from that? So that there's that side of things that makes me inclined to just keep to myself. If people ask me questions, I'll be happy to answer, but not to be actively trying to challenge other people's beliefs and ideas.
So you're not out there trying to convert people out of the Mormon church or any church?
Correct. I don't think I have any right to. I don't think it works anyway, even if you're trying. If somebody's not looking, if they're not searching, it's going to get nowhere anyhow.
Why am I not surprised that a doctor starts off his slide with "do no harm"?
Yeah, exactly. The same principle. You don't want anything you do to cause harm or problems for another human being. Conversely, the truth matters. And again, another medical concept, informed consent is essential. And that's, people often join or participate in the church on the basis of insufficient and often incorrect information. And that's not a good situation. And so the other part of me says, don't you have an obligation to correct those things? And so those are the things that sort of have motivated me to pursue doing something like this.
All right. So it does sound like you've come down on the side of do no harm, because there's a tension that I understand you're explaining between don't do any harm to somebody. On the other hand, if they join Mormonism under false pretenses, then is that right? And should I do something about it?
Right. It's when people make decisions without all the information, that's not a good thing. And that has potential for harm as well.
Right. Okay. So are you ready to go to the next slide? You just let me know and I'll advance the slides. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. And yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah, the unexamined life. Where have I heard that before?
Was it Socrates?
I think so. One of those old Greek guys.
Exactly. And this in the next slide is just sort of some concepts that have dominated my thinking and characterized who I am as a person.
When did you hear this, and what impact did it have on you?
What's that?
When did you hear about this expression, this quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living," and what impact did it have on you?
Oh, I don't know. Probably back going to college days. Probably most everything important in my life started in college. So yeah. Oh yeah. The other thing I was going to mention before is the other reason for doing something like this for me is I'm 75. I've lived a long life. I'm concerned about my legacy and what kind of what's left of me after I'm gone. And I thought this is another way of getting something permanent out there to give me a sense that once I'm gone, I won't be completely gone. Okay.
You will live on in Radio Free Mormon, if nothing else.
If nothing else.
What does this expression mean to you? It's a very famous expression. It gets a lot of time, not enough time, I think. I don't think enough people know this expression. What does this mean to you? The unexamined life is not worth living.
If people don't examine themselves and challenge the assumptions that they're living under, they never grow as a person. They just sort of continue to live in a cocoon. I mean, obviously the expression is harsh. I don't mean that somebody should not live if they're not doing these things, but the concept is you're not going to live a valid, true life unless you examine these things. That's one of the problems with any ideology, whether it's religious or secular. Something that you grow up with certain ideas and beliefs, your perception of the world. That's all well and good, but at some point in time, in order to become a mature person, you need to look at those things, examine them, step outside of that frame of reference, and then ask yourself, what is true, what is not true? And so that's the context in which I interpret that. That's what that phrase means to me.
Very good.
Another theme throughout my life, when I do something, I do it all the way. That can mostly a good thing, but because I can be intense in that regard, it can sometimes work against me. But when I joined the church, I did it all the way. Whenever I do anything, it's all the way. So that's.
Don't you hate it the most when being efficient works against you? I mean, usually it's a good thing, but and I know that there are times that when you're efficient, it can blow up in your face.
Yep. Yeah.
Did you get this expression from your dad? That's where I heard it from my dad.
I don't recall. My relationship with him was distant. He was a good person. We were diametrically opposed on things. I grew up in the 60s. The generation gap was alive and well. He was very materialistic in everything. Money was the only and most important thing in life. So he and I did not really see eye to eye. So I'm not sure that there was any strong influence in those senses. And then once I began my religious journey, that became even more distant. So
because your dad was not a religious man?
Well, he's what I was talking about before. He's culturally and ethnically Jewish, but not a practicing Jew.
But you wanted to get crazy about it.
Yeah, I took it to the extreme.
Yes, religious people will sometimes do that. Okay. Oh, your childhood and Jewish upbringing, yes.
Yeah, so we've covered most of that. Let me look at my notes here, see if there's anything else that I wanted to bring up. Oh yeah, one curious thing that sort of illustrates the two aspects of my personality. Not too long before my bar mitzvah, I became more observant, more rigorous in terms of the ritualistic aspects of the practice of Judaism. I started to take it more seriously. And at one point, I remember going into the bathroom, filling up the sink with water, and attempting to part the water. And well, I read about it. I should be able to do it. So it's sort of humorous. Obviously, nothing happened, but it indicates when I was trying to challenge and implement the things that I'm taught to prove what is true, what isn't true. So,
what did you think? Did you think it would happen? Did you think it might happen?
You don't know till you try. I mean, that's part of the scientific approach to life. Do it and see what happens.
Well, yeah, that's true. But you're the first person I've ever met who has put water in there, at least told me that they put water in their sink when they were around 13 years old and tried to part it like Moses.
Yeah. Maybe 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that ballpark. But
so you were expecting it to work, not to work? Question mark?
I don't, certainly 75, going back that many years, I don't recall what was going through my mind. But in retrospect, I would think, I was saying, well, I've read about this. Let's see what happens if I try it. So
I had a similar experience, though not with water, and I'm not going to go into it now. But at the end of my experience, I was severely disappointed to the point of tears. What was your reaction when you couldn't part the waters?
I don't think, no, I was not expecting it. It was more it was an experiment. The experiment failed. So I don't think it had any emotional impact of that type, if that's what you're talking about.
Did it make you think that the stories in the Old Testament, which to you would be the Torah, I guess,
right,
Did it make you think the stories were more likely to be true or false?
I was not that level of analytic at that age. So it's a legitimate question, but that's not where I was at that point in time. So
it's just that it's something that you remember. In my experience, I'm not quite where you are. I was born in 1960 as opposed to 51. But reflecting on my life, the things that I remember, sometimes they're weird. They're little things. They're things like your story. And I think that there must be a reason I remember them, that my memory retained them, that they had a significance to me. Did you ever reflect back on this this experiment while you were going through your religious journey?
I think that's probably when it occurred to me. I mean, I think your point is valid. You know, why do I remember that and not 1,000 other things that I don't no longer remember? That's a good, interesting perspective.
Oh, it's just one I've come up with. It's probably baloney, but nevertheless, I tend to think that the things we remember, maybe we remember them because they are significant to us. That sounds significant, but so was that the only story you wanted to tell about your Jewish childhood, Don?
Yeah, I mean, the other things I have in my notes are I would regularly go to the Hayden Planetarium, American Museum of Natural Science, Brooklyn Science Museum. Science dominated my worldview at that point.
Hence the experiment.
Yeah, what's that?
Hence the experiment, right?
Exactly. Okay. To show you how much of a nerd I was, for whatever reason, I decided I wanted to calculate 2 to the 100th power, and I got a notebook, and I just did it. There's no way to check it, whether I came up with the right answer, but that's what I did.
Does it have a lot of commas?
It must have. I no longer have that notebook. I'm kind of a pack rat with that kind of stuff, but that one's been lost over time.
That's amazing. So very inquisitive, very science oriented.
Exactly. Yeah, so you can move that next slide. Kind of brings us to the college years, and that's when things really started to take hold. As I said before, my worldview was purely material, mechanistic, and we were just accidental byproducts of the of that process. But then the implications of that started to hit home. You know, why get up in the morning? Why do anything? And so that's where my interest in religion originated. And at first, I became really intrigued by Eastern religions. What appealed to me is there's, at least in some respects, there's nothing supernatural going on. The whole concept of something supernatural was completely antithetical to my scientific mindset. But in Eastern religions, they were saying there are mental states that you can achieve. This is what you need to do to get them. So you don't have to act by faith. You don't have to take anything on faith. You just can experience them.
Did you meditate?
Oh yeah, and that sort of marked this. What's underlying that is a search for what's often called transcendent experiences, something that rises above the limitations of our normal perceptions, that would provide clarity on a level that we don't otherwise experience. And so that was my search.
Did you ever have any kind of those experiences, transcendental?
That is another theme that will percolate through the rest of my story. The one useful thing that came out of my meditation experiences, I found that I would fall asleep during meditation, and that has come in handy.
Well, a lot of people fall asleep during sacrament meetings, so you're not alone. So no transcendental experiences for you through meditation. How many hours would you say that you put into this meditation?
Hard to say. Go to the next slide for a moment.
I will do that, and then I'll put it right up here. That
ties into that. So I came across this book, Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, during that freshman, sophomore year, I forget exactly when. And I read that 600-page book in one night. I stayed up all night to read it. It had a huge impact on me. It spoke about various mystical visionary experiences that he had, and he he formed an organization in the U.S. based in California, I think it was, called the Self-Realization Fellowship, SRF, and you could join them in some fashion and get meditation lessons. So they would send you every week, and they would go through this practice. So I did that for a fair amount of time. I started reading voraciously from the religious literature about other mystical experiences. Some of the names: Meister Eckhart, Sri Ramakrishna, William Blake, Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, just trying to get a feel for these types of transcendent experiences that humans definitely have. What they mean, what their significance is a different question, but there's no question that these things happen. I guess in my previous limited, somewhat naive mindset, I would see those as a psychotic break of some sort. But this did not seem to be in that category. And so I was intrigued by it. And so I started reading all those things, meditating. I was fasting sometimes 2-3 times a week, became a vegetarian. I quickly lost 20 pounds on an already skinny frame. So my parents became concerned about that, sent me to the doctor and all that. But so my desire was intense. I put in the effort. No visionary or transcendent experiences of any type whatsoever. So,
what is that like? What did you tell yourself? I mean, if I'm putting in all this effort and I'm reading voraciously and I'm fasting and I'm meditating and I'm reading books about all these other people who claim to have had all these great transcendental, at least, experiences through meditation. Right. I'm doing what they're telling me. I'm doing it really, really good.
Right.
Why did you think it didn't happen to you at the time and then in retrospect?
At the time, I guess I wasn't working hard enough. Have you heard that expression before?
Oh, yep. That's what I would have been telling myself.
And in retrospect, from my current perspective, different people's brains are wired differently. And you can induce those experiences. There's a famous thing called the God helmet. A scientist in I think is in Toronto. You wear this helmet, it generates magnetic currents applied to the brain. It can create out-of-body experiences. Drugs can do that. Hallucinogenic type things can obviously generate that. Temporal lobe epilepsy can generate those kind of experiences. But for whatever reason, I was not a candidate for any of those things. And another, picking up a verse from the scriptures, Mary pondered these things in her heart. So it's a gentle way of saying it, or putting it on the shelf, things you don't understand. I mean, heck, I was young. What did I understand about the world? But I took note of it, filed it for future reference, and moved on. And during those years, in fact, I met with some representatives of the Unification Church, Sung Myung Moon. The Moonies, they were probably just getting started at that point in time. I was open to anything and everything. Took a course in Hasidism, which is the ultra-Orthodox branch of Judaism. And that was fascinating. But I was just, looking anywhere and everywhere that I could look for truth. And,
very good. And it sounds like you gave the meditation the old college try, and it didn't work out for you personally.
Yeah. And in the midst of this, I guess it was around my college year, my freshman roommate, we've remained friends to this day. His name is Bill. He was doing the same things that we were on the same search together. In fact, he actually at one point traveled out to California to live with the SRF people, Yogananda people out in California. But in any case, he picked up a Book of Mormon that a friend of his from high school had given him, started reading it. He came to me and said, if this book is true, we've got some changing to do.
What was his name again?
Bill.
Bill.
I'm not sure I'm comfortable giving his last name.
Right. And I just didn't remember his first name, which you had given. Bill. Okay.
Yeah. And actually, I remember that afterwards, I had seen a Book of Mormon before that. A different roommate had one on his shelf he'd gotten from the library. I opened it up. It said something about the angel Moroni. I closed it up, put it back on the shelf. So,
You didn't like the Angel Moroni reference?
well, in my very rigorous scientific materialistic mindset, there was no, that was nonsense, essentially.
Okay, so no room for angels, but now this is a second opportunity to look at the Book of Mormon. Your friend
Right.
Bill says, hey, if this is true, we've got a lot of changing to do. Was he already converted, basically?
What's that?
Was he already semi-converted or converted to
No,
Mormonism yet?
not at all. Yeah, he was searching just like I was. He was raised Catholic. He's always been more spiritually oriented, English major, poet, and so not as different from my purely scientific minded mindset. So he was, in a sense, more open in that regard. But no, he was no more. His family friend in high school had given it to him, and he had it, and so that was there. So he told me about it. Like I said before, I was completely open to anything and everything. So we got out the yellow pages. That was the thing back then. Found the church, gave them a call, and started meeting with the missionaries. I mean, I can remember Elder Blackham and Hartwigs, and can picture them to this day.
What are you thinking when you're meeting with the missionaries? I mean, you're going to meet with the missionaries. Are you thinking, I'm just going to find out what this church teaches? It's got an angel Moroni, so I'm not going to like it anyway.
Well, I like to consider myself open-minded. I just set aside whatever, I basically had no probably knowledge or experience in Mormonism, and just said, let's see what they have to say. I've listened to so many other people. There's nothing to lose and everything to gain. So we started meeting. And
do you still feel that way, by the way? There's nothing to lose?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
To me, it's crucial to remain open-minded on anything and everything. Where I stand now is evidence-based. Everything in my life needs evidence to be viable. And I have certain ideas, opinions, and so forth, but I will disregard any and all of them if legitimate, valid evidence comes forward that shows you're wrong. Mm-hmm. So anybody who thinks they've got it all figured out and they don't need to think about these things anymore, that's a problem. Whenever you're committed to your ideology, your dogma, or whatever, the battle's over, and you've lost. So
okay, so you're taking the missionary discussions from two Mormon missionaries who have definitely done what you just described. They've committed it to this religion so much that the battle's over. They're not going to be open-minded about anything else. But you're interested in evidence, and you're taking the missionary discussions. How did that go?
Initially, we spoke two different languages. With my reading and involvement with so many different religions, it was more philosophical definition of God than theirs was. Theirs is obviously a very literal type of explanation. So it took a while to even be able to speak the same language. One thing that I really took note of at that point in time is when they bore their testimony and said they knew the church was true. And that impressed me at that point. It's as if they had the knowledge, that transcendent knowledge that I've always been looking for and not able to get, but they say they knew something. Because at that point in time, which continues to this day, I don't know anything in that sense. I have no knowledge that's beyond doubt, beyond challenge. But they said, yeah, they knew it. So that's
when I stop and think about it, in a very real sense, Moroni's promise is promising a transcendental experience to somebody through which they can know that the Book of Mormon is true.
Yep. And that dominated the next few decades of my life, that promise, and seeking the answer to that promise, as you will see how that unfolds. And so I quickly read through the entire Book of Mormon, devoured the Doctrine and Covenants and whatever other books that they could recommend, and became pretty knowledgeable about the church in short order. You can pull up the next slide.
What other books did you read, by the way? The next slide, so you know, is going to talk about your intensive study.
The one after that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what other books? Oh, gosh.
A Marvelous Work and a Wonder.
That's Churchill. Yeah, Jesus the Christ, Marvelous Work and Wonder. Sure, all the McConkie stuff, if that was out there.
A lot of it was.
Yeah. So I would read certainly orthodox type things.
Right.
And so and I prayed fervently, just as I did before, got no further along than I ever did with this than with anything else. And so I was left, well, how then do I decide? There were things that attracted Mormonism to me. The cosmology.
Just a second, Don, because you really have done a lot of work and study. You're very, very curious, and you do the work and you do the research. You read the Book of Mormon. Okay, let's leave the Doctrine and Covenants and all the other books aside.
Okay.
You read the Book of Mormon. You read the whole thing, which is unusual for investigators, but then you prayed about it to know if it were true by the power of the Holy Ghost, as the Book of Mormon tells us will happen. And you're saying that you tried over and over and again, you got no experience from that.
Nothing. Right.
What did that
was I not worthy? Was I not trying hard enough? You know, the usual questions.
Did it make you doubt whether the missionaries had an experience that they testified about?
I don't recall, although what you're getting at does figure in a little bit later in the story.
Okay. So Mormonism, you saw some good points to Mormonism.
Yeah. So the cosmology, the idea man is the same species as God, that's mind-boggling. That's mind-blowing. Yeah. Another dominant thing, you talk about what I've been other reading that I was doing this time. I was reading a ton of science fiction during those first few years, and that really tied into that quite well. You know, the concept, it's not a supernatural God. You know, we're of the same species. You know, it brought it down to earth while expanding it in a unique fashion. I found that very attractive. The glory of God is intelligence, or in other words, light and truth from the Doctrine and Covenants. That certainly tied in. That touched me, because that's what I'm all about.
Did you find subsequently that the church managed to live up to that aspirational scripture?
Spoiler, no.
No, in Mormonism, the glory of God is actually ignorance. He wants to keep you dumb.
Yeah, that's the net effect. I try to be charitable to them. I don't know what the leaders know, what they don't know, what their motivation is, what their motivation isn't. I can only see what the net impact is of what they're doing and saying. So, the family-centered nature of the church was very important to me. The idea that it's a way of life. It's not just a building that you go to. It's not just a set of doctrines that you believe. It's a way of life, and that all made sense to me. You know, I met a number of the members, and they were good people. You know, and the church is still full of very, very good people at the grassroots level. And
just not as many as there used to be.
Yeah, I couldn't say, but certainly. Next slide.
This is very appealing to me too. This last thing, you know, it's a way of life. It's not a 1 day a week religion. It's a 7 day a week religion. Right. And to some people, that's a huge turnoff, because they only want to, you know, if they want to do religion, if they want to do church, they want to go to church and have it as painless and as quick and as entertaining as possible for an hour on Sunday. Some people are built that way. I was built the way that when this was set before me, I thought, yes, this is the kind of religion I want to be involved in, because it takes total commitment.
Yep. Agreed.
At the beginning, it was a good thing, because this is a manifestation of my commitment to it. But as I went along slowly, I began to realize that it's also a manifestation of the church's ownership of me.
Yeah. But one of the things that the church does, generally speaking, fairly well, is creating local communities where you have legitimately good people doing service to each other. There's downsides to everything, but that's I like to give credit where credit is due. And in fact, I miss that kind of community. The secular world does not provide much of that at this point in time. Let's return to that next slide. Go down to the next one.
I'm going to ask, were the only good points that you saw?
Nope.
Because you actually saw some bad points. And this is before you joined the church that you came up with these lists?
I don't know that I wrote them down, but these are the things that, well, I've got a ton of journals and in preparing for this. And actually, a number of years ago, wrote a sort of mini autobiography where I kind of pulled a lot of the information together.
What year would this have been? Would it have been 1973 or so?
This would have been 71.
71. All right. So your first bullet point, the priesthood being withheld from blacks, was a current thing at the time.
It was, and it was huge in my mind.
While you're looking, can I ask, how did you learn about that? I'm guessing it wasn't from the missionaries.
Good question. There was no internet there. I don't recall. I don't have anything written down that tells me where I came across that.
Somewhere in your studies, you figured that out.
Yeah. I mean, I understood that church leaders, like anybody else, are human with their own weaknesses and imperfections. They're not technically described as being infallible, but yet there were many people outside the church dating back to the earliest years of the church who were somehow able to see that issue correctly and worked conscientiously towards eliminating racism from the society. And I asked myself, why isn't the church on the forefront of this issue rather than bringing up the rear? So that was a big concern. And I pondered it in my heart, put it on the shelf. I'm young, I'm smart, but I know my limits. I realize there may be things that I just don't understand, can't understand yet, and willing to give it some time to see what I might learn over time. The conservative authoritarian attitudes presented in the church were also a significant concern. The whole concept, when the prophet speaks, the thinking of the debate has been done, whatever the phrase is.
It's both. Both have been used.
Both. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. So those were red flags to me. The anti-science, anti-evolution attitude that was present in the church news and elsewhere was a major concern, because the validity of evolution is so obvious to anybody who approaches it with an open mind and reasonable study and research. And the church, it was sometime in 71, 72, I actually wrote a letter to the church news about one of the editorials that they had published, and tried to explain to them that that's not what evolution is. What you're saying, you're missing the point. And these are some ways you can potentially reconcile evolution with the doctrines of the church, trying to reason with them. And I asked that they publish that in the church news. That shows you how naive I was about how the real world works.
Those naive, wonderful days.
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking that at this very time, the president of the church was, or would soon be, or had shortly there before been, Joseph Fielding Smith.
Yeah.
Was he president of the church at the time you were taking these discussions?
Well, this would have been between 71, 72. I don't, you probably know better than I, who was at the helm at that point.
Oh, yeah, I think 71. Now, 72, of course, you got Harold B. Lee, who serves an unexpectedly short period of time before Spencer Kimball becomes the president of the church in 1973. The only reason I bring it up is because, of course, Joseph Fielding Smith was very, very heavily on the side of anti-evolution.
Absolutely.
And he'd written books about it, and His Origin and Destiny. Did you read that book?
Not sure. I don't recall seeing it on my shelf, but I may have borrowed it. I'm not sure.
It was Joseph Fielding Smith's magnum opus against evolution.
Right. Yeah. I remember reading references to it and finding quotes from it. I'm not sure I read the entire volume at one time. The Book of Mormon claims even at that point, 1971, I knew went against traditional scientific understanding, anthropological understanding about the American Indians. But I became aware of certain things that gave me a sliver of hope that there might be some truth to it. You may have heard about the Back Creek Cave in Tennessee. There was a stone that had found there with Hebrew writings on it.
I've definitely heard of that hoax.
Yeah, it was at that point it had been found to be a hoax. So, I would see things like this and that and say, well, maybe there's a glimmer of hope. The idea of going against general understanding, I don't have a problem with that. Often the general consensus can be wrong on many different things. So I thought, well, maybe this is one that could be, and the evidence would be forthcoming. And
if the general consensus is wrong on everything, Mormonism could be true.
Yeah.
The thing that you're driving at, I think, and the thing that I want you to tell me about is I know that you said there's good points and you listed those, and there's 4 of them. And then there's all these other points, which seem, well, first off, there's more of them, and they seem pretty strong.
Right.
They seem pretty, these are things that people have left the church over, but you're joining the church in spite of them and in spite of your knowing about them. Is that right?
Yeah. So next slide is basically that. So it's, how do I decide? Mm-hmm. And this ties into the question you asked about earlier about people's missionaries' experiences. I attended the Brooklyn branch probably at that point in Brooklyn, New York, one the summer, I guess probably the summer between my junior and senior year. And there was somebody visiting there who was from Brooklyn, Don Cohen. And he was a dentist up in the Schenectady area, home visiting family, attending church. And he just happened to be there the Sunday that I visited. So I met him and developed a relationship with him, later visited him in his home in Schenectady. I don't know if you know the book, No More Strangers, Harmon Rector Jr. has a bunch of conversion stories from people.
Yes.
His is one of the stories in that book.
Really?
Yeah. And so I met with him, and he was a very impressive individual. He reports visionary experiences, seeing his father in the spirit and things that I was reading about in the Book of Mormon, in the Bhagavad Gita, in Autobiography of a Yogi, all those books where people report. He was a real life person telling me about these visionary experiences. And that had an impact on me.
And he had gone from being a faithful Jewish person to being a Mormon. Is that right?
Correct.
How old was he at the time compared to you? Was he much older?
He was in practice, I would guess 50 or thereabouts.
All right. So twice your age?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. An authority figure, in other words. Or one that you can look at as someone who has more experience than you.
Well, more experience. I've always been an iconoclast of one sort or another. So authority, this was the 60s. Authority is not something you respect.
You're going to join a church that has general authorities and local authorities. It's all based on authority. Don, what are you doing?
It's a good question. Very good question.
Does it have to do with that?
Yes, it does.
A leap of faith?
Yep. So I knew the things that attracted it to me. I knew the things that I didn't like about it, but I just decided to take a leap of faith and give it the benefit of the doubt and see what happened. In retrospect, that was well-intentioned but ill-conceived. A lot of good.
You had to pay tithing, didn't you?
What's that?
You knew you had to pay tithing, right? They taught you about tithing.
Yeah. I had no income at that point, so that was a theoretical concern.
Right. And theoretical concerns are usually not as important to us as real concerns.
Yeah. It was the conceptual framework of everything that was of importance to me. The vision of what our life here is about, the future of life, that you can go on to become a God, that you don't vanish when you die, you go on, can become as God himself. That's pretty compelling. It certainly was to me, especially at that age.
Was there anything about the change in Sabbath days that you thought about, either good or bad? Because, of course, the Jewish
Right.
people celebrate the original Sabbath on Saturday,
Yeah.
and the Mormons follow pretty much the rest of Christianity, pretty much, and move it to Sunday. So you're going from a Sabbath day observance on Saturday to Sunday. Did that mean anything to you or your family?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I had not attended synagogue other than the high holy days on occasion since I was bar mitzvahed. So that really didn't, whether it was Saturday, Sunday, really didn't make any difference. My parents, especially my father, were not at all pleased about this. They viewed it as a cult. They later, many years later, attended one of the wards with us, and he was expecting it to be a storefront, some sort of thing. So yeah, he didn't care for that at all. But
Our Jewish son is not only becoming a Christian, he's joining a Christian cult.
Yeah. And so I made the decision to join.
You tell me, okay. It seems like even with all these problems that you've identified,
Mm-hmm.
even with this whole scientific atheistic background that you bring to it, even though you've tried meditation, it hasn't worked. You tried praying about the Book of Mormon, it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
That there's something so compelling to you about this teaching of the deification of man that you decide to give it a leap of faith anyway. Is that right? That was a big
part of it. That was a big part of it. The eternal concept of the family. I was getting serious with my girlfriend, soon to be wife, and the idea that that could be an eternal relationship. Mm-hmm. That's also pretty darn appealing.
Yes, it is. At first, at least. After a while, you start dreading it.
Yeah.
You start thinking, eternity is a long time to be stuck with this person.
So for better or worse, I made the decision to be baptized right after graduating from college at University of Buffalo. Met Irving Cohen in the Manhattan branch or ward, I don't know what it was, in New York. And ironically, that Manhattan branch was a former Jewish synagogue. So he baptized me, and that was the next step. I do recall him wearing the ankle to wrist garments, one piece at that point in time.
Oh, really? 1971.
Yeah. This had been 72 when I was baptized.
72. What was the date? Do you remember?
May 25th.
1972.
Yep.
Don Cohen is baptized by Irving Cohen.
Yep. Probably one of the only times a Cohen is baptized a Cohen, but
now Cohen, by the way, my understanding is limited, but that is a name that has a reference to the priestly class. Is that correct?
It does. And in fact, that'll figure into a point that I'll be making shortly. Kohen is the Hebrew, and it means priest. That's the meaning of it. And it's a descendant of Levi, or specifically of Aaron. That priestly class had authority to do certain things in the temple that nobody else could. And so yeah. All right. So we then.
Did your folks come to your baptism?
No.
How were you feeling when you got baptized? Were you happy? Did you feel the Spirit? Did you feel the Holy Ghost?
I felt good. No spiritual manifestation then or since, in the sense that I thought about them. But I felt good about it. I thought it was a good thing for me to be doing.
So if I'm understanding what you just said, throughout your entire experience in Mormonism, no spiritual experiences for Don Cohen. Is that right?
Define spiritual. That's the key. And
I've got to let you define it.
Okay. I'm not aware of any visionary transcendent experience, or have not had any of those visionary transcendent experiences. What they are, how they differ or overlap from emotional experiences, is something we still don't understand. But no, I did not have any of the transcendent experiences that I had sought that would take me over the top and put me into the realm of being beyond doubt.
During your 25 years or so, 35 years or so, as a member of the LDS Church, did you ever get up and fast and testimony meeting and bear your testimony?
Never use the word no. Never. I'm very, very aware of that, very precise. I like to be very precise in my language. I never claimed to know anything, and I still don't claim to know anything. So I would bear my testimony about believing in something, or I think this is what happened here, and I'm grateful that this was a blessing that it came from this, but no, that did not happen.
Everybody else who's getting up is saying, I know this and I know that.
Yeah.
What did you think of that? Did you think they'd had experiences that you didn't have access to, or maybe they were just defining it in a different way, or using their words too loosely?
They were being imprecise in their language. They didn't know what they didn't know. They were sincere, but didn't know what they're. Forgive them, Father. They don't know what they're saying.
So you figure everybody else is in the same boat as you, and nobody's had any spiritual experiences?
Well, I don't know about nobody. Irvin Cohen apparently did. Joseph Smith may have. So yeah, I didn't deny the possibility of having them. I just knew that I didn't have them. And realistically, it was unlikely that most people will say they had them either. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. So then there's another step in your life where you moved to Amherst.
Yeah. So I got my bachelor's degree in religious studies, but as I was coming out of that and starting to get ready to become a member, I wanted to get back into the sciences, and I needed to make a living somehow or other, and wasn't sure how I was going to be able to do that.
You're married by this point.
What's that?
You're married by this point.
Got married in Thanksgiving of our senior year. That obviously
your wife. We haven't really talked about your wife, because you're dating her, and now you're continuing to date her. You're going to get married in your senior year on Thanksgiving. Right. At the same time, you're doing all this stuff with the Mormon missionaries, and you're getting baptized. What's going on with your wife? By the way, are you comfortable sharing her first name?
Let's not. I didn't ask her that explicitly. She prefers. She's got her own story to tell. I can comment to some degree, but basically, she sat on the sidelines, understandably so. During those college years, we met in our freshman year in January of that first year, and she had seen me go through so many iterations of religious ideologies and thinking that she just figured, well, this is another phase that he's going through. Who could blame her? Mm-hmm. And another thing for her is her training and degrees were in anthropology. And the evolution thing obviously was a major thing that stuck in her craw. And so she did not join when I joined. We can, I guess, touch on that when she did. So yeah, that's
okay. So she's not a Mormon. She didn't join when you joined.
Correct.
And now it's your senior year. I'm sorry. Now it's your senior year or so, and your bishop's saying, "Hey, you shouldn't be living together with this woman."
Basically, yeah. And I said, okay. And so we made plans, got married in Thanksgiving break.
You've learned about being married in the temple, to be sealed together for time and eternity, which is the linchpin for the whole eternal family and the deification of man that was so appealing to you.
Right.
What's going on inside of you? Because obviously you want your wife. I'm just going to say your wife, even if you're not married to her at the time. Okay.
Right.
Obviously you want your wife to join the church so you can be sealed together in the temple.
Yeah.
What happened with that?
Well, we'll get there shortly. Once I was baptized, that, for all the reasons you indicate, became a very significant concern. What's the future of this relationship? Mm-hmm. At one point, some member had told her, well, most part member families end in divorce, and that really got her attention. And she doesn't like going into this stuff the way I do. She says, I've moved past that. I don't need to go back. So we finished up in Buffalo. I got baptized. We moved to. So I wanted to get back into sciences. We're not there yet. Okay. I want to get back into the sciences. So I took a course in fisheries biology with this teacher, and it was a graduate level course, senior level course, and I went to him. He needed permission to be able to get into the class. So I spoke with him, and he later said, yeah, I'll let you in, but he was expecting me to drop out after the first class because he knew that I was a religious studies major. You know, what does this guy know about anything? But he ended up being an important figure in my life, kind of took me under his wing, taught me fly fishing, and went beyond just a student-teacher relationship. And so I surprised him. He said, he actually wrote a letter of recommendation for me when I later applied to med school, basically saying that he expected me to drop out, but I ended up getting the highest A in the class. So that was an interesting experience.
Yes. Well, good for you. Did you ever talk Mormonism with him?
I don't think so. Not in any aggressive fashion. I'm sure if he had questions, I would have answered him, but he would be the opposite of that. He was very, very secular, great guy. I mean, had enormous respect for him. Just a good guy, but that wasn't part of his life.
Well, the reason I ask, of course, is because Mormonism puts a lot of pressure on its members to be missionaries. Right. Every member a missionary, and the pressure is there for us to share the gospel with basically everybody we come in contact with.
Right.
Which also leads us to this other question of mine. There's also a lot of pressure for young men to go on a mission, a full-time mission. Now, was any pressure put on you to do that? Did you consider it? Obviously, you didn't go. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, no pressure. Nobody ever suggested I do that. We got married, so it was no longer an option. So, that was, mission was never a consideration. There's another thought I had, I missed, but.
Were there any issues with you and the draft at this time with the Vietnam War going on?
Good question. I was subject to the draft and initiated the application to be a conscientious objector, and even found scriptural basis for that in the Doctrine and Covenants. I think it's section 93, about unless your enemy comes against you 3 times, you only then are you justified in going to war. And I didn't see that happening in the Vietnam War. Nobody was attacking us in that sense. It was a war of aggression. So I was pulling together my application for a conscientious objector. I think I eventually sent it in, but then they did the draft lottery. My number was low enough that was no longer a concern. So I got very lucky in that regard, because I would not have gone. Okay.
So you were not drafted and you did not go on a mission.
Right.
So go ahead and continue.
Oh, yeah. The other thought I had, you talking about missionary work. I am an internally driven person. The fact that the church encourages you, puts it external, I don't respond well to external pressure. My temperament is such that if I genuinely think something is true and believe it, I will look for opportunities to share that. I don't need anybody to tell me to do that. So if he or anybody else had questions along those lines, I would have been quite receptive and more than willing to do it. I don't recall any conversations like that with him. So I needed to make a living, and I wasn't sure what to do. I ended up wanting to do some environmental issues were becoming a significant concern at that point in U.S. history. And so I thought, well, maybe I should be involved in that in some fashion. So I considered forestry, got accepted to some graduate programs out west, and also fisheries biology. And I guess I decided I like fish more than trees. So I headed to UMass Amherst to pursue a degree there.
And you got your master's degree?
I did get my master's degree there. So this is Amherst, Massachusetts. There's like 5 colleges within a very short distance of that. I forget the names of the colleges, some women's college, it's very, very academic type of area. And I was joining the Amherst Ward, which is at the center of that. And so I was just baptized. And after I'd been a member, we moved there like in August, and like January or so, they asked me to teach the Gospel Essential, the Gospel Doctrine class in the University Ward.
The Gospel Doctrine class being the Sunday school class for the adults.
Yep, yep. And it was kind of crazy in retrospect that, I'm barely a member of the church and they're having me do that. And I was ordained an elder right around that same time, after about six or 7 months after baptism.
Only 6 or 7 months? I had to wait the full year.
That's, yeah. Yep, they were fast tracking me, I guess.
You were on a fast track. They put me in charge of teaching as well as soon as I got baptized, but it was the 8-year-olds.
And around that same time as well, I got my patriarchal blessing. That ties into what you were talking about before. So my lineage in that was declared, my blessings would come through the tribe of Judah. And I thought, well, that's not what I was expecting. It seemed like to be the obvious choice. He's Jewish. Levi. He must be from the tribe of Judah. And so I was disappointed, surprised, put it on the shelf.
What were you thinking it would be?
Levi. No question.
Levi. That's what occurred to me.
Yeah.
I mean, Cohen. It's in the name.
Exactly. So maybe if he had been more educated himself, he might have known that.
Or if God had been more educated, he would have known that.
But he was. The blessing itself is really, it went on for many pages. So it was a worthwhile experience. That one little footnote, though, put a little bit of a damper on it.
When you say that about this patriarchal blessing going on for pages, of course, we all talk about the length of our patriarchal blessings.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's a point of pride among many Mormons how long their patriarchal blessing is. But I don't know, I just think about somebody putting his hands on your head, closing his eyes, doing whatever it is he does, and then just spouting pages and pages worth of spiritual sounding language. And I can't help but think of Joseph Smith with his face in a hat.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy there.
How much of it over and over?
How much of it is mental boilerplate? I don't know, but I suspect not. I think, like I said before, most people in the church are sincere. They're doing what they believe is right, and he taps into whatever impressions and insight he can as a human being.
Was there anything that struck you in there?
I'd have to reread it. There were some things that talked about how my heart yearned to enter this, to be born and to enter mortality, something along those lines. Again,
yeah.
This is 75, so I'm 24. Cut me some slack. I'm still pretty young, pretty naive. Had not read any patriarchal blessings before, so I had nothing to compare it with. But it was a positive experience. Let me put it that way. With that,
right. And then you had your next experience, the temple.
Yeah. Let me just backtrack for a second there. I was teaching the gospel doctrine class, and there was a member of the stake presidency in there one time, and he came to me afterwards and said, "Have you ever considered a career in church education, church educational system?" And I thought, well, I hadn't, and I actually looked into it, wrote some letters to the powers that be, and never decided to pursue it. I guess in part I asked what the pay is, and it was pathetic. I said I can't support a family like this. And they even said most teachers in the system have to have another job to support them. So that ended up going nowhere. But that was kind of an interesting thing.
It's no wonder the church has saved so much money. So apparently the stake president or whoever it was impressed with your teaching ability. Apparently. You got a lot of comments from the class, didn't you? Saying that they liked your teaching.
Oh yeah. One of the greatest compliments anybody's ever paid me was a guy named Bruce Gray. He's probably dead now. In sacrament meeting, fast and testimony meeting, when we were preparing to leave to move out of the area, he said, "I've never seen anybody hunger and thirst after knowledge like Don Cohen does." That was 75, 77, 75. That's a long time ago. That's always stuck with me. To me, that's a high compliment. And he got me. So,
Yeah.
all right.
I think it was Mark Twain who said, "I can live on a good compliment for 3 days."
So then moving on to the temple experience, we decided to start our family in our last year of training. And so we went through the process and traveled by ourselves to the Washington Temple. This is from Amherst, Massachusetts, in March of 75.
How far is that?
Guessing 10, 12 hours, perhaps. Maybe not, maybe 10.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Well, 4 to New York, another 4, 8 to 10, I guess, might be realistic. But nothing too bad. But we drove down there on our own, nobody with us.
Is your wife a member yet?
No, she was not yet a member.
Okay.
Wait, no, let me backtrack. Yeah, we could pick that back up. So we moved there in August of 72. I've been a member a couple of months. There was one of the members, his name was Smith. He was inactive, I think. His wife was a member. He was a former teacher or teacher at UMass. He had a fireside at his home that we attended that Henry Eyring went to, the original chemist, Henry Eyring. And my wife was with me. We talked a little bit about evolution. And one statement he made stuck with both of us. The gospel doesn't expect you to believe anything that isn't true. And it doesn't directly address the question, but it left enough leeway to give my wife a little bit of flexibility in that regard. I think I was directly or indirectly putting pressure on her, just expressing my concern. I want this relationship to be eternal. If it's not, what's the point? And so she decided to be baptized in October, and I baptized her. This is in that first year at UMass. So, and so by the time, this is now 2.5 years later that we're going down to the temple to have the marriage sealed.
So October of 72, she was baptized?
Correct.
Okay,
right?
Thank you. So
Yes.
now you're going to the temple to get your endowments, plural,
Right.
and to get sealed. Is anybody going with you? You said you're going alone.
Completely by ourselves, yep. And that was a very different experience than I was expecting. This is the time when I don't think I had seen any of the temple clothing. They were having the film, and it was very entertaining in that sense. But the token signs and penalties, I was like, what is going on here? But ever the humble, obedient person, I said, well, there's got to be something to this that I'm just not getting. And again, I'll go with it, and I'll continue to go as often as I can. And I figured the shortcoming must be in me. If I'm not getting it, the problem is with me, not with the ordinances. But it was very different, disappointing, profoundly perplexing, I guess is one way I've described it.
What were you expecting?
No idea. Really, no idea.
They keep it very, very hidden.
Yeah.
And especially back then.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was that.
But everybody talks about how great it is, and it's the best thing since sliced bread going to the temple.
Yeah. I mean, because I'm a curious person, I always have questions. There is no opportunity to ask questions. Say, what is this about? What is that about?
Mm-hmm.
And, it was just very, very frustrating. But I said, I know the goal that I want. If this is what I need to go through to get there, then I'll be patient, and hopefully it'll all make sense someday.
And the goal is the eternal marriage.
Eternal marriage, and and eventual. To say you're seeking godhood is very egotistical, but it's just the idea of increasing my understanding and knowledge. It's not a status symbol; it's a knowledge that comes by virtue of that eternal progression.
Did you at least like the bit in the endowment where Adam says, I'm seeking further light and knowledge from Father?
Yes, yeah, there are many aspects of that I did like. You know, the cinematic aspects of the creation and all that, and the phrase about the certain things being only figurative with respect, you know, that left me open to being able to incorporate evolution into the whole Adam and Eve story. So, yeah.
By the way, everybody, the line that Don is referring to that used to be in the endowment at that time was a voiceover talking about the creation of Adam and Eve, and that the creation of the man and the woman are the creation account is purely figurative insofar as the man and the woman are concerned. Now, at the time, you're taking this as a nod to an opening for evolution as opposed to an opening for the Adam God theory.
Right. Yeah. Evolution was a big thing for the both of us, and finding some leeway in that dialogue to allow for that. You know, that's the way I heard it.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Whether that was the intent or not, who knows? But
did you get married the next day or the same day that you got your endowments?
I'm guessing same day. I'm not really sure. Really sure.
What was that like?
That was good. I mean, the promises, you know, were right in line with the long-term picture of what I was looking for. So yeah, I didn't have any problem with that.
Okay, you got the robes, you've got the accoutrements, you've got the altar, you've got the patriarchal grip.
Yep.
And all of that was okay as long as you're getting married forever.
Yeah, I didn't find anything objectionable in that. So let's see. All right. So the next stage is move to Philadelphia. So I got a job at the Academy of Natural Sciences of Philadelphia, working as a biologist there. And because I do everything 100%, fully active in church there. And I became pretty close with Hugh Pinnock. You probably know that name.
I do. He was a leader in the church. He was 70, and he was actually closely involved with the whole, the church side of the Mark Hoffman scandal.
Exactly. So I met him there, and we became fairly close. And I became...
You met him there. What was he doing there?
He was mission president.
Oh, okay. He wasn't at the academy.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. He was the mission president of Philadelphia, whatever the terminology was at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And go to the next slide, which is sort of the next thing. The church had initiated a program of proselytizing to the Jewish people in Philadelphia that I became a part of. There was a meeting in Philadelphia on December 8th, 1975, presided over by Lawrence C. Dunn of the First Quorum of 70, with 6 mission presidents, including President Pinnock and others. And they said this was specifically authorized by the first presidency to prepare the gospel message for the Jews. And there were about 20 missionaries called and set apart to be part of that effort, with badges issued, and that's the one that was mine. And
I'm going to want to ask you about this and what your experiences were, because I remember it's 1979. It is November. I'm at the MTC. I don't know about now, but the MTC actually had a bookstore then. And my recollection, it was downstairs. It was very small. It was 2 adjoining very small rooms. They had very limited stuff there. But the one thing I remember seeing, it was on the bottom shelf, and the cover's looking up at me, and it had Star of David on it, and it was titled something about preaching the gospel to the Jewish people. And that was the first I had ever even heard about it. And I don't think I've heard much about it since, but I thought, how exciting to be preaching the gospel to the Jewish people. Too bad I'm going to Japan.
I did a little reading about that a couple of days ago. What I was involved in was by no means the first effort, but it was the first effort since like 1959. I think the church had done some things in California during the 50s to try and reach out, but never went anywhere. They never did anything further. So I think they were kind of trying again here in Philadelphia, and was also involved in Pittsburgh when I eventually ended up there a number of years later.
How did that go? Did you baptize anybody?
This is in Philadelphia. Yes. I forget how. Yeah, that's right. There was a guy named Stan. He was married to a member named Pam. He was in medical school. His background was surprisingly similar to me. In college, he had done studying in a lot of different religions, and he must have been in our ward, or he's in our stake anyway. And so I began meeting with him, and he eventually decided to join the church, and I baptized him. But that was a rare success story there. As things turned out, he later divorced it, and he became an ophthalmologist as well, just for whatever that's worth. He later divorced his wife and left the church, so my baptism didn't stick. So,
just observing that in another field, non-Mormon field, there is a movement, and has been for some time, of Jewish people becoming Christian. Mm-hmm. And they're like Jewish people.
Jews for Jesus.
Jews for Jesus, that's it.
Yeah, yeah. And, my situation is ambiguous, or it can be received differently. On the one hand, because of my background, somebody would be more open to talking with me. On the other hand, they would see me as a complete traitor to the faith and would have no interest in talking to me. And I saw both of those things in action. Next, let's see.
Well, can you tell us about one of those things in action, that somebody saw you as a traitor to the faith?
We set up, as part of that, there was I became part of an interfaith group. And I was scheduled to speak at that interfaith group. And Ronnie Ofer, O-F-E-R, I think he was in charge of it. He later became the head of B'nai B'rith in Israel, prominent guy. And the meeting that I was going to speak at was very poorly attended. And he said he thinks that was why. They didn't want to hear from a Cohen talk about Mormonism. So that might be one example there.
Okay. So there's your mission that you served. How many years? 2 years?
Well, I was not a formal missionary. Right. I was stake missionary and so forth. Well, I guess I did that. We were there 2 years, so I guess I was involved with that to one degree or another. Go down to the next slide. I don't know if you know who Mark Willis is.
I don't. Please tell me.
Mark Hinckley Willis. He's a nephew of Gordon B. Hinckley. And I developed a relationship with him there. He was in the state presidency at that point. He's one of the most kindest, humblest, sincerest, spiritual people I've met in the church or elsewhere. I've always been impressed with him, and have been impressed with him to this day. We've kept in touch over the years, probably been about a decade or so since. With he was then the youngest vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank. He went on to become the president of the Federal Reserve System in Minneapolis. Was later CEO or whatever it is of General Mills. Big guy in the business world, mission president in Hawaii. I'm shocked to this day that he was never asked to become a general authority. I thought for sure this guy has all that they need of somebody. So who knows what the story is there. But in any case, the way this happened, so I was called and set apart as a stake missionary to be a part of that Jewish proselytizing effort. And at that meeting, they asked me to share my testimony, my conversion story in front of Lauren Dunn and 6 mission presidents. That was pretty humbling, but that was interesting. But in any case, they called and set me part of stake missionary, and then I was asked to go meet with Mark Willis. And Basically, I had a beard at that time, as I have had most of my adult life. As soon as I was able to grow one, I've had a beard. And so he talked to me and said, having a beard really isn't consistent with the missionary standards, and basically asked me to shave it off. And that was a difficult thing. What comes out of a man is what defiles somebody, not what goes into it. What matters is not the outward appearance. Those are the principles that were the core of my being. What you look like, external things don't matter, what's inside that matters. So this was not a violation, but an affront to that sensibility. But I chose to exercise humility and obedience and shaved it off. And, felt good about it. I didn't do it begrudgingly. He inspired me to do it. His example, that's still his big thing, is obedience. Not in the hierarchical fashion, not in the oppressive fashion, but just genuine obedience, if you can call it that, to righteous principles. It's not an authoritarian stance.
But what's righteous about shaving your beard off?
Well, yeah, I try to understand things in the context how other people understand things, see things from their frame of reference, not just my frame of reference, and that's how I think he perceives it. So I decided to do it, and like I said, we've kept a close relationship ever since. It's probably been about 10 years since we've been in touch, but yeah. So let's see what's next.
What is next? I'll put it up here on the screen.
Yeah, so I was at Philly for a year or so and realized career-wise, if I wanted to really do this and become successful and really do it fully, 100%, I would need a PhD. So I started looking into that, seeing if the academy would defray the cost, and they wouldn't. And the idea of returning to my original career goal, becoming a doctor, it just, it came, and the decision was made almost as soon as it came. And so I still had to complete some of the courses, prerequisites, which had been abandoned when I switched my major in college, and applied to a number of schools and ended up going back to Buffalo for med school. So we left for there in 77. And let's see. Yeah, so I started school with a 2-year-old and a newborn, which was not very characteristic of the medical school class that I was a part of. And it's funny, it was difficult. I remember having an hour by hour schedule for my time, with slots for family involvement and that, so forth. Study this from 8 to 10, this from 10 to 11, very, very organized. And in one sense, I felt that I was at an advantage relative to the other students, because I knew who I was in life, what I wanted out of life. I had a family, didn't have to worry about that stuff. I had a goal, I had a purpose, had meaning, and that enabled me to, really be successful in medical school. So that was good. So as soon, again, I continued church membership 100%. And soon after getting to Buffalo, I was Gospel Essentials teacher, ward mission leader, and president in the stake 70s Quorum.
And so everybody know Gospel Essentials is not the Sunday school for the adults. It's the Sunday school for the investigators or the new members.
Exactly.
And the lessons are strikingly similar between the two anyway. They're all the same.
I participated in a radio show, another interfaith type of radio show that was in 78.
Yes.
On a public radio channel that was interesting. I still have the cassette recording from it. I should buy a cassette player and listen to it. I haven't done that in a long time. But it was probably triggered by, let's see. Yeah, the next slide is the next talking point. So in 78, the revelation was received, was announced, removing the priesthood ban from the black. Next slide. It was incredibly exciting. I had never felt that this was the will of the Lord. But as I read, it sounded like an administrative document. It's no, thus saith the Lord. This is what happened, and
You're talking about official declaration number 2. Official declaration number 2, the announcement that blacks can now have the priesthood and go to the temple.
Exactly, and no acknowledgement of why it was not that way all along. No explanation. Nothing whatsoever.
By the way, I should correct what I just said. And the announcement said that black people can now have the priesthood if you're a male, and you can go to the temple.
Yeah, so that was a big thing to happen there, but again, it's just sort of a mixed experience for me. I'm glad it happened, but it still left unanswered as many questions as I ever had.
So you're glad that now the church has lifted.
Right.
This is one of the big problems you had when you're making the decision to join the church. Now it's lifted this ban.
Right.
And that's great, but you're looking at the text and it's not a revelation.
It doesn't, it's not what I would have expected. And if you read more about accounts of what happened in the room, it was a administrative decision that was because of the people involved, and this is their deciding. That's what defines a revelation nowadays. So,
did you want to tell us more about? Was it a radio program that you went on?
I wish I could. I just don't recall. But they had representatives of different religions talking about. I don't know, but in retrospect, the triggering event may have been that announcement about the priesthood thing would make the Mormon Church bring it into the public purview.
So what was the discussion about on this radio program?
I wish. I'll have to get that cassette out and tell you again. I probably shouldn't even mention it, but just...
Okay. It sounded like an interesting story. How did you get involved in that?
Don't know. I mean, I was involved in missionary work.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe... I did it later I did another radio show like that in Pittsburgh that the state president involved me with. So it's probably some leader who was involved in the community, knowing of my involvement with missionary work, probably asked me to participate.
Well, it sounds like you are a person who is a good teacher. You're able to convey your thoughts and feelings and beliefs well. And so you would be a natural person to tap for a public discussion.
I guess so. And I enjoyed it. Like I said, things that I'm passionate about, I love sharing my thinking and being challenged. If somebody disagrees with me, bring it on, challenge me. Let's have a rational, open dialogue. If I'm wrong, show me how I'm wrong. I'm definitely open to change. Those kind of conversations nowadays don't seem to occur, but that's what I try to do anyway.
Right. Your next slide, have we covered this, the move to Pittsburgh for internship and residency?
Yeah, so not really anything else in medical school to talk about. Ended up leaving med school with 3 kids, and we moved to Pittsburgh, decided that my specialty would be ophthalmology. And so we moved to Pittsburgh for internship at Mercy Hospital, and then my ophthalmology residency in Pittsburgh Eye and Ear Hospital.
What is the difference between internship and residency, and how long do both of those take, at least in your case?
An internship is almost exclusively 1 year. It's generally in medical school, you receive general training. In internship, you get to experience the practice of medicine in a number of different specialties. It's more broad ranging and a general internship. It's not focused on one particular area of medicine to make you a better, well-rounded doctor. Residency follows that, and it could be any specialty: family medicine, internal medicine, neurosurgery, neurology, ophthalmology, ear, nose, and throat. That's where you get the dedicated training that you'll be using as a practicing physician. Ophthalmology was 3 years. Most I said are 3 years. Some neurosurgery is more than that because it's more to learn, more experience needed. So yeah, a total of 4 years in Pittsburgh.
All right. Did anything happen of significance there with your spiritual journey during those years?
Not really. I was too busy to to do much of anything else. You know, the things that bothered me were always there, but no cracks in the foundation at that point.
Right. Were you involved in missionary work there as well?
Yeah. So moved to Pittsburgh. I was made a president in the stake 70s council with responsibility for the Jewish proselytizing effort. So it's kind of the same stuff that had done in Pittsburgh, and developed a good relationship with the mission president, Roy Brown, at the time. I don't know what became of him. And he had me and my wife represent him at various conferences and things around the mission, which was a challenging but a fun experience. In my role there, I organized 3 statewide activities in Pittsburgh. One, we had a Passover Seder done in the stake building. I had Stanley Klickstein from the Beth Israel Center in Pleasant Hills come in and conduct that. We had a program on the Holocaust by somebody from the Pittsburgh Holocaust Center, and then a presentation on Hanukkah and other Jewish holidays from a local rabbi.
I was going to say, how were those received?
Very well. I mean, it was oriented towards the membership, hopefully who could bring people to it. So they were well attended, well received. Did they accomplish anything? Probably not.
So members were supposed to bring their friends to this. So it was basically a missionary opportunity as well.
Yes.
Everything in Mormonism is a missionary opportunity.
Absolutely. And, I was able to educate. I figured the more members know about Judaism, the more comfortable they'll be interacting with people. They'll be in a much better position to do missionary work.
I think in my stake, this was in Washington State a number of years ago, they had some fellow come in and do a Seder.
Cool.
Oh, can you tell the audience briefly what a Seder is, just in case anybody out there doesn't know?
It's oh gosh, put me on the spot here.
It's a Passover meal, isn't it?
It's a Passover meal. I'm trying to think. There's various rituals associated with it. A lot of prayers and things that are commemorating different events. It has to do with the Jews leaving Egypt and celebrating the events that occurred there. That's where the matzah comes from, the unleavened bread, because they had to leave in a hurry. It's reliving the history, recreating the history to keep that alive is essentially what it's about. It's a nice idea.
I think that story also involves a parting of a certain sea.
I guess that is true. I didn't make that connection then, but yep, that is true.
During your time as a Mormon, did you ever start to believe that story? Did your feelings toward it change?
My mindset has a baseline skepticism. So believing something is possible is different from believing that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I always thought things could be true in essence, but not in reality, that it may not be literally true, but it may, I don't know, mental gymnastics to try and juggle those claims with my view of how the world actually works.
Let me give you a Mormon example. Did you believe that Joseph Smith saw God in Jesus Christ?
That I would have answered to yes. Yes.
What's the difference between the two? In other words, the parting of the Red Sea, which you never could bring yourself to believe, I'm understanding, and Joseph Smith and the first vision, which you did believe.
One defies the laws of physics. The one, he had a spiritual visionary experience that many other humans have had. So I guess that would be the difference. having something, or having in the book of Joshua, having the sun stand still for a day. That didn't happen. So I guess the older the source, I cut it some slack that it's not literal. They may have thought it was literal, but it was, that's not how the world works.
Okay. So Joseph Smith could have had some kind of transcendental experience and vision.
Yes. And I still think that's possible. I allow for all possibilities, but that's certainly one of them. There's some people speculate he had temporal lobe epilepsy and was subject to these things. Whether there was drug-induced varieties of that in various meetings, who knows? I've
What
never
about
seen
Moroni?
Yeah,
You started
that
with
would be,
Moroni is the reason you're not even going to look at this Book of Mormon the first time you encountered it, right?
yeah. Well,
After 2 minutes looking at it, no angels. We're not doing angels.
yeah. I mean, once you open the door, all of those things are possible.
Okay.
And like reading that book, Autobiography of Yogi, that opened a lot of doors for me, doors to what is possible, whereas before I didn't acknowledge them as possible. What it means is an entirely separate question. So in Pittsburgh, I was starting to burn out to some degree. I've been putting in so much time, energy, and resources for so many years. And so many of the callings were administrative in nature, taking care of logistics and details rather than actually doing things. And so I met with the stake president, who was sympathetic. And so he released me from my missionary callings and said, well, the bishop is going to call you. He said I'm going to be called as a Sunday school president. I drove home from that meeting literally in tears. I was so crushed and disappointed. I had poured my heart out to him, sharing the frustrations I was having in the callings I had in large measure because of the administrative nature of them rather than actually doing things and interacting with people. And here he was calling me the Sunday school president.
You never interact with people.
No.
Well, your counselors, the bishop.
So, fortunately, I met with the bishop, and I shared with him the same things I shared with the stake president. And he relented, and then he called me to a teaching position. So that happened. So that I finished up training, and the next thing was moved to med school. Let's see.
I have that slide up just so you can see it here.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving on from there, I think the next one is, we moved to Mooresville. And that's where we completed my training in June of '84, and went to Mooresville to open up you can go either take that one off or go to
I don't want to go there yet. Don, on this slide, you say, it seemed I was doing more and more, sacrificing time, money, energy, and other resources in serving the church and its members. But instead of receiving the spiritual blessings, I felt more and more burnt out.
Yep. Kind of speaks for itself.
Well, it does, and it's very powerful. And I know you were telling that story about meeting with your stake president and your bishop as symptomatic of this.
Yeah.
I think this is very powerful, and it strikes me as somewhat of a turning point, perhaps, in your journey.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was just all catching up to me, and but it's not the end of the story yet, incredibly so.
No, because this is what, 1984, you say, and you're going to be a member until 2005, so you still got 20 years to go.
Yep.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. We moved there. We were part of the Statesville Ward, which is 20 miles to our north, part of the Hickory Stake, 50 miles away, and met with the stake president not long after we got there, and he called me to be on the High Council.
Can I ask you a question, Don?
Sure.
Why North Carolina to start your private practice?
Grew up in New York, lived in Buffalo, Philadelphia, Massachusetts. We were tired of snow and traffic, wanted to move south, better weather, afraid as a Jew and a Mormon to move too far south, and North Carolina just fit the bill. We were mainly looking at mid-Atlantic states, and I discovered that Mooresville was looking for a ophthalmologist to bring into town, and they flew me in. I'd never been to North Carolina, so they flew me in. I had to look around, and the more I saw, the more I liked. It's a small town, about 30 miles north of Charlotte, a big city growing in our direction. The town itself was very, very small. It would be a solo practice, which I wasn't looking for, but the hospital administration offered assistance in getting things up and helping me make that happen. The city school system was a major concern, and the Mooresville Graded School District had a very good reputation. So my wife came down to visit as well, and it was a relatively easy decision. So that's how we ended up in North Carolina.
Don, it sounds idyllic.
It is in many respects. It's grown a lot as I anticipated, perhaps more than I might have anticipated. But yeah, it's a good place to live, no question.
But for you and your family at the time, how perfect? What could go wrong?
Yeah, and the things that I moved there for all worked out really well. Had a very successful practice. Yeah, it was great. It was a good decision. You know, it's where the bulk of our child rearing took place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So while all that's going on, and you're getting all the success and having a wonderful and thriving practice in ophthalmology. What's going on with your faith?
Yeah, so the stake president called me to the High Council, which I thought was ridiculous.
What did you mean was ridiculous?
Administrative calling. Everything is administration. You know, I didn't think it. I wanted to interact with people, to do things that have real world results now. Most of the administrative work at the church could be handled through, I said this a decade before that, could be handled with a good record keeping system or email system or something like that. And there's so much wasted time there. And here I was being called to do that. And I don't want to lose my place here.
It does sound like you really chafed against that administrative stuff. I remember having some kind of a discussion with the bishop whenever.
So I ran
years ago about the same thing, because I was talking about, it seems like you do a lot of administering and not a lot of ministering.
That's a good way to express the thing. That's right on point.
But he expressed his belief to me that administering was just as important as ministering, and I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I agree. Each is important, but they're very, very different things.
Mm-hmm.
So as I always did, essentially reflexively, I accepted the calling, and not too long afterwards, I don't know how long I lasted doing that, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. I shared my frustration with that stake president, and he said, "Okay, I'll release you. We'll call you as the high priest group leader."
Was that a step up in your opinion?
That was a sideways step, backward step, accomplishing nothing.
It's still administrative.
It absolutely is administrative.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the ward we were in, the bishop was not real efficient at getting things done, so that actually never happened. And before it could happen, the stake president called a meeting in Statesville, that's the ward town 20 miles to our north, for all those who might be interested in a Mooresville branch of the church, to assess the level of interest. And I certainly attended there, and for better or worse, not surprisingly, I was fairly vocal there.
Okay, so Mooresville being small doesn't have its own ward. You're having to travel to go to church.
Traveling 20 miles to the north to attend meetings. Yep.
And now there's enough Mormons, enough members of the church in Mooresville, where you live and have your practice, that they're starting to think maybe we'll just organize a branch.
To consider one, exactly.
By the way, everybody, a branch is a small ward. You got a ward, you got a bishop, you got around 200 people active. You're lucky. That's the way it's designed for, as I understand it, to have all the callings and everything. In places where they don't have that many, they don't have enough for all the callings, they create a branch. And instead of a bishop, over the branch, they have a branch president.
Okay, so I went to that meeting, was fairly vocal. The stake president called me aside afterwards and asked me to start informally looking for possible places to meet.
But you were vocal in the affirmative that there should be a branch in Mooresville?
Yes. Yeah, I didn't want to drive to Statesville anymore. And then 2 months later, he called me back in and said he'd received authorization to create the branch, and which came as no surprise to me. He asked me to ask as branch president. This was in May of 1986, so about 2 years after we had moved there.
Wait a second. Now you get called as branch president? Now that's administrative, isn't it?
Well, it is, but there's much more to it than that. I mean, this is creating something out of nothing, you know, and that challenge was interesting, obviously challenging by definition, trying to contact, reactivate people who weren't attending. And it was very exciting. So there are administrative aspects to it, but that's okay. You know, I can handle those on the side. It's the interactions with people that were important to me. And, you know, we made it work. You know, I found a building. Actually, we met initially in the War Memorial Building, a town building. We'd have to come there Sundays, sweep out the cigarette butts and stuff. And my son would peck out melodies on a keyboard, acting as our primary chorister. You know, it was a small, local, nice thing. And then I forget how long we were there, 2, 3, 6 months. The town notified me, because we're a religious organization, they're not allowed to rent to us. And I am about 98% certain that some prominent citizens in the town were not happy about our meeting there and made that happen.
Mm-hmm.
As I was a fairly prominent citizen at that point, and I was the first ophthalmologist to be full-time in that town. So I achieved a certain notoriety there. People, they no longer had to go out of town to see their ophthalmologist and have their eye surgery and so forth. And so I achieved a certain amount of notoriety. And I was asked to speak at the Rotary Club, and to talk about Mormonism, because they also knew I was Mormon, and which I was happy to do. After the meeting, one of the wives of a prominent town citizen came up to me, said, "You know, our church is praying against you." So that kind of indicates it was a small southern town, not particularly open to Jews or Mormons in certain segments of the community as well. Right. So,
well, what happened with the branch and the meeting place?
So I found another place.
So you did get booted?
Yeah. Oh, we did get booted. I'm sure they were technically right. No, they probably wouldn't have been forced it or worried about it if somebody had not complained. I don't know that, but that seems consistent with everything that I know about that period of time.
Okay. And
so we got to a much better facility that we rented, that was our own to rent, and it was really quite suitable. And we had plans in the work for our own building to be built. And I met with our regional representative, LVR Evans, who is in Charleston, South Carolina area. I don't think regional representatives are a thing anymore, but they were kind of almost a direct link from the 12 or the 70 to the stakes and wards.
It was another name for middle level management.
Yeah. But he was a good guy. He was a Mark Willis type of guy, and he and I also became friends. I was able to share things with him. So I have nothing but good things to say about him. So this was the Mooresville branch. Little in the southern part of Iredell County, in the northern part of Mecklenburg County, the town to our south, there was another branch, the North Meck branch, and it had its own branch president. They were about the same size, maybe smaller than us. And so the idea came up, why don't we merge these into one unit? And I was a part of those discussions, working with Alvy Evans, and eventually those were combined. And I expected that the branch president of the North Mech branch, who had been there forever, former member of the stake presidency, that he would be called as the branch president. I felt not certain, but that would be the most likely outcome. But we were called in, and I was asked to continue on as branch president of what's now called the Lake Norman branch, the combined Mooresville and North Mech branch.
What is happening with your faith during the time that you're serving as a branch president?
It was more and more stressful. Between 88, so that happened in 88, between 88 and 89, between the demands of my practice, 4 children, church responsibilities. At one point, I was chief of staff at the hospital. So yeah, it was getting harder and harder. So yeah, that's my slide there. Again, I was doing all the right things, but feeling worse and worse. And I felt a need to obtain an undeniable testimony. Now, this may come across as arrogant, ambitious, but in the back of my mind, I know myself, I know what abilities I have, I know my weaknesses, which are many, but I know the strengths that I have. I always envisioned, once I became financially independent, that I would then turn to full-time church service. Why not? It's the most important thing in my life. Mission president, even general authority. I mean, I had contact and some snail mail exchanges with people like LeGrand Richards, Neil A. Maxwell. I'd have doctrinal questions, and they actually responded, not just their secretary. I'd had contact with people like Mark Willis, Alvy Evans. In fact, one of my conversations with Alvy Evans, we were talking about some of my struggles, and he said, the general authorities are aware of you. So I thought a path like that would be possible. But I realized if I was going to consider that level of commitment and responsibility, I had to know beyond the shadow of a doubt that the church was true. This, I think it's true, I believe it's true, just was not going to cut it. And so,
Don, while you're thinking about that, I understand that what your feelings were about the regular rank and file members bearing their testimony. If asked in testimony meeting that they were probably saying they know when they really didn't know. Do you think the general authorities had a superior kind of spiritual knowledge?
I guess I would answer that differently depending on what year you would have asked that to me. At this point in time, I don't know, but I doubt it. And in fact, I couldn't find it readily, but there's a statement by Gordon B. Hinckley that was essentially said the same thing. Their revelation is no different from the promptings that members get. So yeah, that to answer that question, originally I would have thought they did. Now I'm much more skeptical.
But you feel like you need that kind of spiritual confirmation before you can commit to a life of administrative service in the church. Really is what it is. It's the thing you hate the most.
Yeah. And I mean, full-time service in service to the truth, what more could I want? Like way back in my college years, I wanted to become, my roommate Bill and I naively in our adolescent fantasies said, we should move to Japan and become monks and do this full-time. You know, if that's what's most important, you need to do it full-time. And so I foresaw wanting to do that for the church. And I could not do that with the questions and doubts that I had. And so I sought as, let's see.
I'm dying to find out what you did to gain a testimony.
Yeah, so go down to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so this sort of says what we were just talking about. I'd had the same types of uplifting feelings, emotions, similar experiences with all other church members. But I had to be honest with myself, this was not knowledge in any real profound sense of the word. People say you never had a testimony. I had the same testimony anybody else that the vast majority of members had. But for me, that it's not knowledge, and it wasn't enough in order to sustain me and form a foundation for the type of service I was anticipating. Next slide down, I think, gets at the question that you just answered. Next one down. There. Oh, I'm sorry. Go up again. Did I not see that?
I acknowledge my weaknesses. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped one. I prayed as deeply.
Yeah. You can just read that. I'll pray.
Let me read it out loud. This also goes out in an audio format without the video.
Okay.
So it's very important to have it read if you want the listener to hear it as well.
Good point. Good point.
It's also going to be really small on the cell phone. I prayed as deeply, fervently, frequently, and persistently as I had ever done before in my life. I prayed alone in the branch president's office, which was your office. I traveled to the mountains on the Blue Ridge, to the woods at Duke Forest State Park to find isolation, and prayed there. I fasted along with my prayers.
And I got absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
What were you asking?
Go to the next slide and read that if you want.
I acknowledged my weaknesses and prayed to be shown what is true. If what I had based my life on for the previous 17 years was of him, i.e. God, I pleaded that if God wanted me to serve him with everything that was within me, I would need to know in order to be able to do that. I even prayed that if I were not sufficiently worthy to receive such an answer, that he tell somebody else who was, and have that person then tell me. That's a creative workaround.
Exactly. I mean, if I'm not worthy, I can accept that. But if you're there, tell somebody else. I'm okay with that. If somebody says, "Yeah, I just had God told me," and whatever, I would have been impressed. That would have touched me and perhaps changed the outcome. But
and that didn't happen either.
That did not happen either. Next slide.
How are you feeling while you're doing this?
Horrible, absolutely horrible. Stressed out to the max, which will play into the next phase. But go ahead, if you don't mind reading the next slide.
Yeah, you wrote, thinking of the scriptures, ask and ye shall receive, knock and it shall be opened. Well, you're knocking.
Yep.
I felt as though my hand was bloodied and broken from endless knocking. But there was no answer. I had asked a fish of my father, but he had given me a stone, to use another scriptural metaphor.
Exactly. I mean, it was unbearable. Next slide.
Do you want to read this, Don?
Yeah. The idea that I might have devoted several decades of my life and given thousands upon thousands of dollars to a church whose claims might be false was incredibly hard to even consider.
So through this process of knocking and getting no answer over and over again, it made you consider the idea, which is anathema to most Mormons to even think, that maybe the church is not true.
Exactly. It's something that even voicing the question, it was always there in the background that there were doubts, there was questions, but I had given the church the benefit of the doubt for many years now. But now I'm asking that question, maybe it's not.
I can put this next slide up if you like.
Yeah, go ahead. But I had to be. Go ahead.
You go ahead, please. No, I'd rather have you read it.
But I had to be true to myself and maintain my integrity and be willing to accept whatever the evidence would support. I couldn't just assume anything was true. The insatiable desire for truth that I have always had, which led me into the church to begin with, had to be trusted as much now, wherever it led.
Don, I've got to ask you the question, okay? You say, I couldn't just assume anything was true. Had you not just been doing that for the past 17 years, assuming that Mormonism was true?
Absolutely. I could no longer, I guess I should rewrite that. I could no longer just assume anything was true.
It's just remarkable to me how far you went, not just 17 years in time, but also to becoming a branch president, a missionary, very, very involved, very, very faithful in terms of believing and testifying about Joseph Smith, even though you didn't use the no word.
Right.
But still, you're a branch president, for crying out loud. And yet you did all of that just based upon an assumption that
Yep.
Mormonism was true. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. I mean, I was acting on faith.
Okay.
Acting on faith. One of the verses that often came to mind during this period is, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief.
Right. Or, oh, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Did you think about that one a lot too?
Yeah, that one as well.
Yeah.
Next slide down.
Okay. Things are getting intense.
Things are getting intense. Actually, close that for a second. So that was my state of mind. I went to meet with the stake president in the fall of, this would have been 89. And I shared with him these struggles. And I said, I don't know how wise it is to have somebody who has such fundamental questions about God, about the church, about everything, serve as the spiritual leader of a congregation. And he was sympathetic. And so I was released from my calling as branch president in December of 89. So that's like 3.5 years from the Mooresville branch and 1.5 years since the combined ward Lake Norman branch.
Did the stake president do anything to try and reach out and help in any way?
I don't recall anything specific. That's not saying anything negative about him. He was a kind man. I have no ill will towards him. He's a good man, doing the best he can with what he's been given. I mean, the question, there's nobody that can give me the answers I'm looking for. And so yeah. So next slide is
And is it the answer that you're looking for, that personal answer that you can only get from God, that you haven't gotten yet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Something unmistakable, undeniable that says, yes, this is my work. This is the church. In whatever format he thinks I would receive it.
I suppose that if he had been that other person to whom God could have revealed the answer that he could not reveal to you because of your unworthiness.
Interesting. I had not thought about that. That's a good point.
Isn't it funny that all roads in Mormonism lead to unworthiness?
Yeah. Yeah.
Here we go. 5 months after you're released.
As they say in the South, the bottom dropped out. Have you heard that expression?
I have. I didn't know it was from the South, though.
Well, I don't know either. That's the context I usually heard it from. But so I was 5 months in after my release, and I became ill. I started running a fever, and within a week, I was critically ill. Shaking chills. I had elders, home teachers come over a couple of times to minister to me. And I got worse and worse, running high fevers.
You know, you're supposed to get better after you get a blessing.
Yeah. No, that definitely didn't happen. And I ended up becoming acutely short of breath, went to the local hospital. My oxygen concentration was incredibly low. They put me on oxygen, took x-rays, examined me, and again, I was critically ill. So they shipped me down to Charlotte to Mercy Hospital. Was admitted to the intensive care unit there. And within a short period of time, ended up on a ventilator.
Good heavens.
Yeah, blood pressure was bottoming out. Became yellow as a pumpkin because of liver failure. Kidneys were not doing well. And my wife and kids were hard to talk about. Called down from home when the few times that they weren't home, saying he might not make it through the night. So it was bad. It was really bad. And during this time, they had me sedated, heavily sedated, paralyzed, because otherwise they don't want me fighting the ventilator. I was in a nightmarish, feverish state. It was horrible. But even in there, I was looking for that tunnel, for that white light at the end of the tunnel that I'd read so much about in near-death experiences. Still on a spiritual journey of some sort, but it was nothing. It was just endless suffering. They eventually diagnosed a blood infection. It's called sepsis, ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. Probably how it happened, nobody knows. I had a known diagnosis. It's called mitral valve prolapse. Fairly common condition where the mitral valve gets a little floppy in the heart. It does make it more susceptible to infection, but there wasn't really anything occurring that should have caused that. But that's presumably what happened. That valve got infected, it spread to my bloodstream, and led to complete cardiovascular collapse. Through medical management, I eventually recovered to some degree, but I was emaciated, weight loss. I couldn't sit up or stand up. I was able to recover to some degree, and I was just dying to get back home. I couldn't take another night in there. I guess I recovered enough that I said, they're not doing anything for me here that we couldn't do at home. I always like to do things on my own. And so they finally agreed to send me home. And we ended up having to send up a hospital bed with nasal oxygen, and it was horrendous. It went on like that for, June 22nd is when I got home, until July 3rd, maybe a week and a half. Occasional days I might be improving, but essentially things got steadily worse. And one morning I woke up and I couldn't breathe at all. They took me back to the emergency room. X-ray showed my chest. The chest X-ray was completely whited out. Oxygen was horrible again. They transferred me this time to Presbyterian Hospital, back in the ICU, and they did additional studies. And the mitral valve essentially had completely failed. So when that happens, the mitral valve, when your heart contracts, the blood that gets pumped to the rest of your body is kept in place by the mitral valve, so it doesn't go the other way. If that's not working, it's pumping, but the blood's not getting where it needs to go. So they made that diagnosis, and I thought, well, manage it medically, but that wasn't going to be the case. They brought in a cardiovascular surgeon, and he met with me and said, we're going to have to replace that valve. And I said, okay. I mean, what can you say to that? And so that was on July 3rd. I was admitted. July 6th, they did the surgery, replaced the valve with a St. Jude prosthetic mitral valve. And once that was done, I was able to start a legitimate recovery. They kept me in a full 2 weeks for antibiotics to make sure there was no residual infection left. And then I went home, and this time I could actually start recovering. It was a long haul. I was out of work completely for about 3 months, but bought a treadmill where I could start getting some strength back, and little by little I recovered. So
did you see this experience as somehow involved in your spiritual journey? Was God behind this in any way?
I don't think I interpreted it in that way. I think stress can reduce immunity. And so I have to think that the incredibly stressed out state I was in may have been a contributing factor to the infection developing to begin with, or making it worse once it had developed. Pure speculation. Don't know. There's no way of answering that. But,
All right, but I know that's the administrative aspect of the church that you really didn't like, but you've been released from it now. You've been released as branch president for 5 months,
right.
but you're still under this stress.
The stress being, I still don't know what's true. I still don't know if I've been wasting my time, if I've been fooling myself. And then all the shelf items, the questions about Book of Mormon, historicity, DNA, Book of Abraham, all the usual things that crop up, they are off the shelf and being actively examined. You know, what's with the first vision? What's with polygamy?
Mhm.
So once that crisis had occurred, there's no way to stop it. You know, and I had to. The search for truth continued. I had to find out what was right, what was wrong, what was true, what was false.
It's like through all of these experiences, you had finally come to the point where you were open to considering the alternative objectively.
Yeah, exactly, which is hard to do. And I understand more than 100% why people are reluctant to do it. It's a painful process.
I was really stubborn about this whole thing. It took me decades and decades, and I didn't have to have open heart surgery or anything like that. But it sounds like you really had to go through a lot to get you prepared to be in this place.
It seems that way. You know, whether it was random occurrence, I mean, I have no idea, but that's how my story played out.
Very good. Now, there's another slide here.
Yeah, so that basically says what we were talking about there.
After being incredibly fortunate to survive it all, which you were, my doubts and questions continued unabated. Did you give God any credit for your surviving this experience?
I don't think I did. So that's the one of the problems with an intercessory type God.
Mm-hmm.
If I did that, then what about all the other people that were similarly afflicted who didn't? Right around that time, there was a branch member who had a brain tumor who ended up dying. Jim Henson was, the Muppet guy. He developed an infection similar to mine. He died.
He ignored it. He kept working.
All these people had people praying for them, and yet theirs weren't answered. So I was uncomfortable with the idea of saying God saved me, because that implies that he didn't save somebody else, which leads to a lot of bad paradoxes. Actually, one important book on that topic. Bring up the slide, if you would.
This next slide?
Yes.
Oh, Bart Ehrman, yes.
Yes.
We had him on the show a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I listened to that. That was really good. He's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
So his book, God's Problem, was really important to me. God's Problem, subtitle, How the Bible Fails to Answer Our Most Important Questions, Why We Suffer. That was an important book to me to kind of disentangle a lot of ideas. And next slide.
Don, had you already been considering the problem of evil before reading this book? I'm guessing maybe.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the idea of a God that answers prayers creates as many or more problems as it answers. So yes, but they went from the back of my mind to the forefront of my mind.
Can you read the part above the title of the book in the slide?
I became increasingly bothered by the evil and suffering in the world, having more and more difficulty reconciling this with the existence of any type of loving supreme being. Reading this book provided a very helpful perspective. I was keeping a file of newspaper clippings at one point. Baby is killed by a random bullet from a drive-by shooting. Mm-hmm. Senseless suffering of the innocent, and trying to reconcile that with the usual God of Christianity was an impossible task for me.
You actually kept a file with clippings in it.
I did. I've got them upstairs somewhere. Yep.
So what impact did this book have on you? Because basically Bart Ehrman, I haven't read this book, but I'm guessing, having read about him, I know this is one of the main issues that he had as well. And the fact that the problem of evil tends to demonstrate, at least to some people, that the idea of the Christian intercessionary God is who is all good and all loving is probably not accurate.
Right. Blanking out for a second. The impact, I was beginning to suspect the fact that I hadn't gotten any answers was because there was nobody there to answer. I guess in a nutshell is where that was leading me.
I'm almost wondering if this book was significant to you, not because it introduced new ideas, but because it crystallized ideas that you were already germinating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, there's another slide a few times down about some other books that were really important then. So let's go down to the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, so this gets to
wait a second. I think there's one before this. Yes, you remained in this state of limbo.
Yep.
For 16 years, from 1989 until around 2005.
Yep.
That's a long time to be carrying this kind of cognitive dissonance, Don.
Yep. I don't know what that says about me, good, bad, or ugly, but that
you're stubborn.
I guess so.
That's what it says about you. There's a lot of people who are stubborn, who stay in the church, even though they've got a lot of significant doubts, and they just keep on keeping on and put this on the shelf as much as they can.
Yeah.
They ignore it as long as they can until finally, sometime, it swims up behind them and bites them in the ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this next one says this.
Yeah, so I had not shared, I had decided when this journey started in 89, 90, when it really came to the forefront, I decided not to share my questions, my doubts with my kids. I didn't want to upset the apple cart. I had and have a great family. They've got good hearts, compassionate hearts, honesty, great character. And given the relative financial success I had achieved, I was afraid of killing the golden goose, killing the goose that laid the golden egg. Things were going well in my family, with me on financial ground. I hated to change things. Another example of that conflicted state, at one point I wrote tithing checks for about a year, but did not hand them in. I just kept them. I didn't feel good about paying it. I didn't feel good about not paying it. So I sort of did it halfway. And
well, at least you're halfway left the money with you.
Exactly. Thinking that if I eventually resolve it, then I can catch up. The money's there, all prepared. So yeah, these were still very difficult years. So I did not share any of this with my kids. Whether that was a smart move or a stupid move, we can debate endlessly. There's a part of me that feels I should have, at that point in time when they would be more receptive to it. But I didn't, and I have to live with the consequences. The next slide, all this is a prompt.
Don, I want to ask you, I understand about the kids, and there are arguments on either side. I don't think it's a black and white issue. How about your wife? What's going on there? Because she's the one who joined the church because of you.
Yeah, so she was happy to move past it. I mean, in a sense, I feel bad because in some respects, I didn't leave her any choice. It's join the church or lose me. I mean, it wasn't that blatant, but that was the net effect. That was what a church member had told her. Part member families end up in divorce. And her family obviously was important to her, and she served admirably in the church, Relief Society president, Young Women's president, primary president. She did all the things, and was, provided a huge amount of service. But once we got into this phase of it, this certainly I shared with her all of my struggles, all my questions, all my doubts, and she had no problem accepting those things. Is probably more willing to accept them than I was.
So she had not developed her own independent testimony of the truth of the church.
No more than any other church member. I mean, how do you define an independent testimony?
Well, some of them think they're a lot stronger.
She would have to answer that question. I understand what you're asking. I don't think it's my place to answer exactly what her state of. All I can see is she did all the things that a faithful member would and should do.
I think the fact that she's happy that you are losing your faith in the church answers the question.
Yeah. On that point, losing faith,
mm-hmm.
I really detest that expression. It's used in many podcasts, and to me, it's not a good expression, because I'm not losing my faith. I'm gaining experience, knowledge. I'm gaining understanding of how the world really works. I'm abandoning faith in things that are unjustifiable, for which there's no evidence. So losing faith is a negative way to characterize the type of experience that somebody comes in. I understand why people use it, and within that context, it's true. But again, I'm very particular about my words, and that expression always kind of bothers me.
Yeah, it seems like you're in your experience, in your example, it's particularly appropriate.
This is true. I see your point.
Yeah, because you had that faith in the Mormon church in spite of all the negative stuff. There's positive stuff. In spite of the lack of evidence, it was possible, but still you went for it because you were going to see if it worked and apply your faith in the LDS church, which you did for how long? 2005, from when to 2005?
89, 90, 15 years, 16 years.
When were you baptized?
72.
Okay, that sounds like 33 years. That's over 3 decades.
Yeah, from the beginning, yeah.
Well, you certainly gave it your best effort. I can tell that. Now, how did your son become aware of your doubts?
This is interesting. So when I was going through all this stuff, so I had been an avid reader of Sunstone magazine, and there was the Borderlands section. I forget the name of the gentleman who used to edit that.
Borderlands. That wasn't, oh my gosh, the science fiction writer Orson Scott Card, was it?
No, I know his writings well. I love his writings.
Okay.
I was dismayed when I found out what he was about. But no, the Borderlands is a segment in Sunstone magazine. The periodical, there's a paper periodical, I guess online as well. But it's a place where basically people who were struggling with their testimony, they were in the borderlands. They weren't in, they weren't out. That's what the borderlands of Mormonism was. Okay,
so I'm coming up with titled "Braving the Borderlands" by D. Jeff Burton. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, that's it. So I got in touch with him, and I submitted a personal account of my struggles that was eventually published in the December 2006 issue. We changed some of the detail. I didn't use my name, it was anonymous. We changed some of the specifics, number of children, other things like that, to kind of hide my identity. So that was published in December 2006. So
why did you want to hide your identity? I mean, that's a lot of work there. That's a lot of changes. You're really making sure that nobody can ferret out who it is who's behind the story.
Because I was always afraid for negative impact on my family. Again, getting back to the do no harm. I didn't want my story to have a negative impact on my kids. They're all thriving, doing well. What if my sharing this and they're becoming aware of this shakes them, and then all hell breaks loose? What right do I have to upset the apple cart in that regard? So that was my rationale. Wise or unwise, that's how I approached it.
Well, that leads us back to the thread of your son finding out.
Yeah, so we went to visit him. He was in Winston-Salem at this point. He followed in my footsteps at med school. He's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. We visited him a few months later, and as we were getting ready to leave, he asked, can you come in here for a second? Let me talk to you. And he said to me, have you ever published something in Sunstone magazine? And I wish I had had a picture of what my face must have looked like at that point.
Whatever it looked like, I bet it said yes.
I mean, I can't lie. I wouldn't lie. And so I said yes. So he said he had read that piece, and he said he read through it and said, that's got to be my father. He wrote to Jeff Burton asking about it, and Jeff Burton, appropriately so, said, I can't tell you who that's anonymous. I got to protect his anonymity. And but he figured it out. So we then had a discussion on all the issues that were, and that's right. He said one thing in particular that got his attention was where I said in the article, were it not for the havoc it would create with our children and grandchildren, I would likely become inactive. So even then, 2007, I was still separating myself from that and maintaining some semblance of activity. We had cut back over the years, but but that he said that really caught his attention, and so I stayed for another hour or more, and I shared with him all the issues, all my concerns, and all the things, and he did his own research. He may have asked me one or two questions following that, but maybe 6 months or so later, he and his wife came to visit us, and he said he's done. And he left. He and his wife left. So
how did that make you feel?
It was a good thing for them. It was reassured. His wife at that time had questions for a long time anyway, but was just putting them aside out of fear for her marriage.
It is amazing, this culture in Mormonism, which you've hit on several times now, that regardless of the doubts and the concerns and the questions that we have, the culture is such that we are influenced not to share them with anybody else, but to keep them to ourselves.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I agree. So even as late as 2007, I was still in no man's land.
Are we ready for this next slide?
Let's see.
Book of Mormon history.
Yeah. So we kind of faded away and never overtly announced anything. But so these are some of the things that this sort of gets into the phase of my getting out. So the first slide here, for better or worse, the church's very foundation is based on claims that are outside the religious domain and reside firmly in areas that are legitimately subject to scientific examination. This is a crucial concept.
Yeah.
The religions can make any kind of spiritual, religious claims. That's in its own dominion. Science is essentially incapable of proving or disproving it. So I have no problems there. The church, for better or worse, goes beyond that and makes claims that are very testable with the tools of science. And in each and every case, the evidence is overwhelmingly against the church's claims. This doesn't mean God doesn't exist, doesn't mean that Jesus isn't the Christ, but the church's claims that make it unique for what it is do not hold up. Next slide down. Let's see.
That's one of the things that made it so exciting to me when I joined the church, that there were things that could be testable. And according to the information I was getting from the church sources and the apologetic sources, everything was thumbs up on the evidence side on all of these.
Exactly. And that's what I saw in 72 that encouraged me to go ahead and give them the benefit of the doubt. Exactly. And what really made the difference for me to break the stalemate was my reading in the areas of neuroscience and psychology. And I've got a listing there of some really important books: Why We Believe What We Believe, How We Believe and Why People Believe Weird Things, On Being Certain, Mistakes were made, but not by me.
Mm.
Understanding how our minds work, I guess, is really what it comes down to.
You're coming back to your psychology roots.
Yes, yes. Next one down. People may know about Paul H. Dunn with his faith-promoting stories. And the point here is not to embarrass him. I'm sure he meant well. Most people in the church are well-intentioned, but he told stories that were factually not true. The point to be made here is people who listened to his sermons felt the Spirit and concluded from that, based their testimony on things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever feelings, whatever significance those feelings, those experiences have, has no bearing on whether there's a real factual basis to the events portrayed in the book. You know, speaking about the Book of Mormon, you can get a good.
And it was even worse than that because Paul H. Dunn, even though I had those spiritual experiences when I listened to the tapes of his telling his war stories, and I didn't build my testimony on those experiences, but when I found out that they were all fake, what it did was it cast into doubt all the spiritual experiences I had had before or after that, or apart from Paul H. Dunn.
Yes, yes. But a lot of people do. That is the basis for their testimonies, these faith-promoting stories like this. So, yeah, I mean, it's not that way for everybody, but it is for a fair number of people.
Ultimately, what is the First Vision account except for a faith-promoting story?
Oh, gosh. Next one down.
All right.
So the things that people experience that they identify as spiritual experience in the vast majority of cases, the emotions that they describe as the basis for their testimony when listening. I feel the same thing listening to Mozart's Requiem, seeing a performance of Les Mis, or watching a movie such as The Natural. Members claims that the feelings they experience when reading the Book of Mormon proves to them that the Book of Mormon is true, are no more justified than my thinking that Roy Hobbs was a real baseball player because
he wasn't real.
Afraid
that
not.
Wasn't a real story.
Because I was so moved by the events depicted in the movie. The spiritual experiences are real, but they can't be used to identify facts, truth, or whatever. Whatever value they have, that's not one of them. And I had to make sure Roy Hobbs was not a real character, and he's not.
He wasn't, huh? Okay. Wow, that's an interesting analogy. I guess you could use that for a lot of things like Field of Dreams or anything where you have emotional experience. Not that those ball players weren't real, because I think they were real, but the fact that they're coming out of the cornfield to play.
Exactly. Okay, go down. We may rely more on the slides from here on. This is, I just love this. Mark Twain, the easy confidence with which I know another man's religion is folly teaches me to suspect that my own is also.
When did you discover this quote?
I have no idea.
Was it while you were still believing?
Probably. Mm-hmm. I had a file that I kept on my computer where I'd run into things like this, and I have a file called sayings, and I would just put them in there for future reference. So yeah, it could have been any time in the last 10, 20, 30 years.
The easy confidence with which I know another man's religion is folly teaches me to suspect that my own is also.
Yeah.
That's profound. There are very few people that it teaches. I mean, we all think other people's religions are folly, but rarely do we stop and think, well, wait a second, what does that say about my own religion?
Exactly.
Let's see here, the next slide.
Yeah, so this is the crucial concept. Testimonies rely on internal subjective experience, which seem self-evident and beyond doubt. But once you start studying perception, neuroscience, and psychology, you get a very different understanding of that. Let's go down. I love optical illusions. I always have. Something as simple as that can show how our basic physical senses can be fooled. In this one, the square, there's a checkerboard with a column on it. And for the people who are just listening, there are two squares, one marked A, one marked B. When we look at square A, it is obviously quite a bit darker than the square that is marked B. And I looked at that and I said, when I said, no, they're the same, I opened the image in Photoshop and took samples of the image in both of those. And I proved that they are the same shade. And even though my brain knew, I think you just muted.
How can that be when they're so obviously not the same shade?
I
A
know.
is dark, B is light. Now I know that B is in the shadow of this.
I know.
What did
But
you call it?
are,
This tube, this object that's sitting on the board.
Yeah, cylinder of some sort.
Cylinder. It's a cylinder. Obviously, it's in the shadow, and that's where the optical illusion takes effect. But even so, and even accounting for that, I would swear to you, I would swear in a court of law that the B square is much lighter than the A square.
Yep. And
that's an amazing illusion.
Even though I proved it to myself that they were the same shade, I could not convince my perceptions to see it that way.
Yeah, I can't.
No, it can't be done. Next down. It's important to understand the basis of our perception. Our brain creates models, and they're not direct observations. So using vision is a great example. Light comes into our eyes. An actual image is focused on the retina, at the back of the eye. It is, if you look inside it, you can see an actual picture. But that image is then transmitted via the optic nerve and vast amount of complex processes all the way to the brain as a digital signal. You've left the analog world, and you're dealing with electrical digital signals, and eventually gets the occipital part of the brain with tremendous processing, and eventually an image or a model is perceived by the conscious mind. Go down.
By the way, is it true that the original image that gets put on the retina is upside down?
It is.
And it is the brain?
Brain sorts it out.
That puts it right there.
There's some interesting experiments. If you take somebody and have them wear glasses that invert the image so it is upside down, over time their brain accommodates and learns how to interpret it properly, and they then see it right side up.
Really?
Yes, it shows how the brain is the source of all our perceptions. It constructs models of how we perceive reality. When you use your eyes, you think you're looking at something, but what you're seeing is, go to the next slide, because it's sort of a sequence here. Our perceptions are virtual, generated by the brain utilizing incoming data from our various senses. So that's how it works. We create models from our vision, hearing, senses. It's all processed in the brain. We're not seeing reality. We're seeing a virtual reconstructed model of the brain. And that is what we perceive as reality. It's kind of got matrix connotations.
It's a pretty good sensor, because I can reach out my hand, and if you're reaching out your hand, I can shake your hand and know exactly where it is.
Yep. It's a very precise model. But as the optical illusion showed, it's easily fooled into having misperceptions.
Mm-hmm.
So if our vision, which seems to be the most self-evident of all our senses, can be fooled so easily and give us false information about the world, how much easier would it be to fool the far more complex perceptions involved in more abstract mental processes?
Can you flesh that out for me? In other words, what are these more abstract mental processes to which you refer that are really easier to fool?
Emotions, for one. Emotions are derived from a variety of. I don't fully understand how emotions are generated, but it's a complex processing done by the brain with feedback, input from various parts of the brain, various organs, and ideas. Consciousness itself, ideas, we have no grasp on exactly how that comes into being. So if taking something as basic as vision, if that's a virtual reconstruction that is easily fooled when it seems relatively straightforward, when you have something else that's involving much, much more complicated processing, how much more easily that can be fooled, and much less reliable as a source of objective truth, I guess is.
Well, when it comes to emotions, I guess pretty much all of us have been fooled at some time or other.
Yep. Yep.
So here's the next slide about memory.
Yeah. So memory is another thing that we misunderstand. We think of it as a video recorder. The information is stored and replayed as needed, providing accurate recall. It doesn't work that way. Each time we remember something, the memory itself is recalled and restored, and it actually changes our current understanding, and other things going on will change it. There's a famous study involving recollections around the Challenger disaster that happened many years ago.
That was January of 1986, wasn't it?
Sounds about right. Sounds about right. They had a study group where they had them write down their experiences, their recollections, everything that was going on relative to the Challenger disaster. And then they would take that same study group and revisit that on, I don't know the exact chronology, but a year down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years, 20, whatever. And they would have them independently write again what their recollections were of that event.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found in many cases, there were fundamentally different accounts of what happened. Their memory of what happened was fundamentally different from what they wrote at the time. With some of those people, you would say, here is what you wrote in your own handwriting. And the person would say, yes, I wrote that, but that's not how it happened. They trust their current memory more than that was shown there, what they wrote when the events actually happened. Human frailty, how easy it is. You just can't trust your perceptions, memory, perception, senses. Next slide.
Well, what are we to do in a situation like this if we come to realize we can't even trust our own perceptions?
Next slide.
Here, I'll
make that larger if you would, so I can read it. Thanks. If neither our very senses nor our memories can be implicitly trusted to determine what is true or real, and we haven't even touched on the various cognitive biases which further interfere with accurate processing of information, then how do we ever make any progress in determining what is in fact true or real? Next slide.
Well, I hope you're going to answer that question.
I hope so too. Scientific method is the only methodology I am aware of that enables us to transcend the limitations of our senses, our memories, our biases, to actually uncover the truth about ourselves and the world. So that, I hope that wasn't too much of an academic lecture on things, but to me, these concepts were crucial for me to get past, to break the deadlock that I was in, the struggle between what's true, what's not true. I realize now that even if I had gotten an answer to that prayer, some visionary experience, I would have no basis to justify, to conclude that the church is true, that the Book of Mormon is actual history, because I had that experience. If it had happened at the time, I'm sure I would have drawn that conclusion. But now I understand that they're two completely different things. I'm still fascinated by visionary spiritual experiences. You know, if I were to start my career over, it'd probably be in neuroscience, trying to understand the brain. It's fascinating to me and worthy of study. But I've lived long enough to know that you cannot implicitly trust your perceptions to determine what is objectively true about reality. Science is the only thing, and if somebody can show me how that's not the case, or science certainly can be implemented imperfectly. Scientists themselves are going to be imperfect, but the scientific method, the methodology of how you do it, is the only way I know to identify truth.
Well, I will tell you, I relied heavily on my spiritual experiences to confirm for me the truth of the church. And it was much, much later when I was finally prepared to accept the idea that other people in other religions had equally as strong spiritual experiences that were equally as valid to them, that their church was true.
Yeah, exactly. I had that in my notes. I didn't really get to read that, but yeah, these experiences are fascinating, but they're universal. And the problems arise when each individual interprets them in the light of the things that they have been taught since childhood.
Yes. An intermediate step for me was once I understood that, I'd always heard it, of course, but I chalked it up to either it's Satan giving them their spiritual experience. Of course, God's giving me my spiritual experience, but Satan for them.
Exactly.
Or they're wrong, or they're just like kind of crazy or cuckoo or something.
Exactly.
So there's all these different ways you can explain it without having to really grapple with it. But by the time I was ready to grapple with it and accept that that was true and that was real for them, then my intermediate step, which I was in for a while, was, okay, well, that doesn't mean that my spiritual experience didn't happen, but what it means is that my spiritual experience is for me. It applies only to me. It has no application beyond me, and theirs has the same thing. It applies only to them and doesn't extend beyond them.
Right.
So it's kind of a limited kind of truth. I don't know exactly how to say it, but it was how I was trying to limp along with this.
Yeah, and I see. I mean, you do what you can to hold on to things.
Yes. And then you kept holding on to things. And then what is it, 2011 comes along?
Yep. So by this time, we had essentially stopped attending church. I don't have it recorded exactly when we stopped. I'm guessing 2007, 2008, something like that. And we had been sort of fading over the previous 3, 4, 5 years anyway. So the way this unfolded was interesting. I got a call, I think it was first from the ward's executive secretary. So they had seen my name on all these Temple Recommend books in the past and just wondering what's up with me. So I said, sure, come on over. And I had no problem talking with people. He came over and I gave him the whole spiel about why I think the church's claims are not correct. Probably a little bit about the neuroscience part of it, and in simple terms, just how easily we can fool ourselves, and this is why I no longer am a part of the church. And he said, okay, just went over his head. He didn't challenge it. I don't think he tried to apply it to himself. So whatever. Not long after that, I got a call saying the bishop wants to come over. And I said, sure, bring it on. And in what I would have previously called a prompting of the Spirit, I said to myself, I bet he's coming to clean up the membership records. And so he came over and asked, why, what's going on in your life? And I gave him the same spiel, explained to him how I understood things and why I didn't think the church was true. And he said, well, if that's how you feel, why are you keeping your membership in the church? So I was spot on there. And I had prepared, anticipating that, my resignation letter. So he said that. I said, here you go. And that's, I formally resigned in 2011.
It sounds easy.
Well, at that point, it was just I had not done it, again, because of considerations for family, as illogical as it is to some degree. A follow-up to the story is a few years later, I saw an article somewhere about a gentleman, I think it was a former bishop of the Mormon church in Mooresville or Lake Norman, was arrested in Florida on a child pornography sting operation. And I looked at the name and I contacted somebody in the ward who I still had connection with, and I said, is that the same guy? And he said, yeah, that was him. So interesting story.
Apostles had to choose stake presidents back then.
Well, he was not a stake president, but or had to choose the stake president.
He was a guy who had been the stake president.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I guess the old discernment gift wasn't working that day.
That whole concept is problematic at best,
isn't it? Now you got another slide here, and I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about this. Your examination of church claims.
Yeah. So around 2015, right around the same time the CES letter was coming into existence. I mean, I had jotted this down in various forms over the years, but what I did is I approached as objectively as I could, using church-friendly sources as I could, not being sarcastic or accusatory in any way, just lay it out for you here, and approached it in terms of the factual claims of the church, the epistemological considerations, how we know what we know. That's the stuff we've been talking for the latter part of the exam. And then lastly, the examining the fruits of the church in practice, the good and the bad. And
I'm going to ask you something, Don, before you get to the good and the bad. 2011, you have resigned from the church, correct?
Right.
This is 2000. It's 4 years later.
Right.
Why haven't you moved on, and why are you still thinking about the church and whether it's true?
Because I still have children in the church.
Okay.
If that were not the case, I might still have some academic/intellectual interest in it, but outside of that, it would be much easier to completely move on.
Are you still wondering if it's true?
No.
So you're doing this to present to your children, or what?
Present, as I've looked at my contribution to trying to provide a neutral resource to somebody examining church claims, to somebody who has an open mind. I found that many of the documents in this category were unbalanced, not fair, sometimes sarcastic, that would turn off somebody. This is for the somebody who's honestly asking questions and wants answers.
All right. You're trying to come up with sort of a balanced approach. I know Bill Reel did this with his Mormon primer, looks at all the different issues and tries to give actually one section faithful approach, one side critical, and then one side that tries to, be neutral.
Gotcha.
But yours is just neutral throughout.
The tone I try to make neutral throughout. I do indicate why the impressions, my tentative conclusions, let me put it that way. I think it's important to distinguish the factual claims in its own category, because those are clear cut. Then, somebody says, well, I don't know. It's easy for somebody to say, well, we don't have all the evidence. Eventually it'll be shown right. I know because I've had these experiences. And that's where that second section identifies that. And then examining the fruits is, okay, if you are in it, these are the good things, these are the bad things. And, you can evaluate it that way.
Was this a book that you wrote?
No, it's maybe 24 pages or something like that. That probably doesn't come across in the graphic, but that examining church claim is a link to the document.
Okay, but you did write it down.
The document that this is?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. It's a 24-page document where I go through. It's in three separate sections. I didn't include that here. We're running way past the time that you thought we'd be spending anyway.
Yes, and time does get away from us like that. I just want to ask, what did you do with it?
I've got a photography website. I just put it there in a folder, and I think I posted in one of the Reddits at some point, or if somebody asks, I can send them a link to it. I've not done a whole lot with it. So it's there for whoever might need it. Perhaps if somebody listens to this and might be curious, maybe, we can put a link to it somewhere. Just my analysis of exactly, what it says, examining the church claims.
Did you send it to anybody? Did you give it to anybody to read?
Other than sharing it through a link, some people on Reddit, some friends and things would read it. My social media presence is very, very limited, mostly by choice, mostly because that's who I am. Mm-hmm. So I've not tried to publicize it in any way. It was just important for me to get it on the record as a summation, kind of the same way I wrote my autobiography, as a record of who I am, leaving something semi-permanent I think
you had mentioned writing this with your children primarily in mind. Is that correct?
That's certainly one part of it. Absolutely. I have not sent it to them. It's not my place to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's with somebody like them in mind, where somebody who's a faithful church member would read it and hopefully not be offended or threatened by it, I guess, is the intent. Whether that is accomplished in the document, I don't know, but that was the intent.
All right. Well, now we are getting to your thoughts and musings as a searcher for truth, which you certainly are.
That's just a small blog with 12 entries in it. I just threw that in for whoever might be interested in. Where I chose certain topics and did a piece on them. One of them, for example, is truth is the final arbiter. Science is the final arbiter of truth, and I kind of elaborate on that. And there's some other things about some other topics. So I just threw that. Nothing we need to talk about there. Just perhaps a link you could throw into the show notes or whatever.
So Don, let me ask you a question. Why is it that so many people like you, like me, like lots of Mormons and people outside Mormonism, why is it that we're so predisposed largely to want to find out what the truth is about things?
I don't know. I can't speak for anybody but myself, but it's been in my DNA from birth. It's driven me all my life. My family is tremendously important. They have prime importance, and it's coupled with my search for truth. I don't know. Do you have any ideas on?
No, not one. I was wondering if you did. But there's a lot of people. I mean, scientists generally, lots and lots of people. There are some people who don't really care. Yeah. But maybe it has to do with this whole examined life thing that you're talking about. The unexamined life is not worth living. That maybe part of that, if not a large part of it, is a quest for the truth.
It's not an easy life. It's a more difficult life because you're constantly challenging your understanding and questioning things. It's easier to just kind of go along with the status quo and not worry about it. And maybe you'll have a happier life for all I know. I don't know, but I can't do that.
Okay. Let me see if there's anything else here. Yeah, we're coming back to the very last one. It looks like we are about done.
Yeah. The only other topic I've sort of touched on or other concept is as far as where I stand now in terms of my beliefs. I don't like to use the word belief because I don't understand it. I have no use for it. I can have I'm driven to okay. My wife had me know it's something I needed to know. I'm driven to understand the world as it is, not as I would like it to be. Why is regarding belief? Why affirm something to be true unless it's based on credible evidence? To say I believe in something really doesn't mean anything. In fact, one of those blog entries has to do facts, belief, faith, and hope. Facts, belief, faith, and hope. Yeah, distinguishing between those concepts. Faith and belief are pretty similar, but there are things that I hope to be true that I don't have evidence for. I don't believe they're true, but I hope they're true. But getting back to the existence of God. So I think it's fairly straightforward to disprove the church's factual claims, but that does not inherently disprove the existence of God. I remain agnostic on that issue. To be otherwise would imply knowledge, which I don't have any. I have fundamental problems with the traditional concepts of God, the intercessory God, especially because the problems of evil, the usual concepts of God, I cannot grasp how those can be. But yet we don't understand how consciousness comes to exist. Is it a fundamental physical property of the universe? Is when I die, is there something going on? Is there another dimension to existence beyond what we understand as purely physical? I don't know. I would like for something to be there, but I don't see any evidence of any, but I'm open to anything. I would certainly like to, I hope that when I die, I would continue in some form. I don't expect it to happen, but certainly I'm open to it, and it would be a nice surprise. I'm also kind of PO'd that if I'm right and there is nothing, I will never get to know it.
Yes, it's tough to say I told you so.
Yeah, exactly. Do
you have any other closing thoughts for our audience, Don, about you, your life, your journey before I exit?
I don't think so. We've covered an enormous amount of material. I can't think of anything that I could possibly add to it. I hope I was not too detail oriented, too pedantic at times, but
I think you're the opposite of pedantic. I haven't heard a lot of pedanticism from you. Maybe the audience will disagree. Let us know in the live chat. Do you think that Don Cohen was pedantic? You seem like a wonderful guy who's had an incredible journey, and I really appreciate your sharing it with us and our audience here on Radio Free Mormon, Don. Everybody out there, please remember to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't so far. Thank you to all of our lovely listeners who have gone the extra mile and gone to radiofreemormon.org and made a donation there. If you haven't yet, please go to radiofreemormon.org, make a donation today. You'll be glad you did. So, Don, thank you again very much. Until next time, this is Radio Free Mormon, signing off the air.
Thank you, Orphan.
You bet.